Hi everybody, and welcome. We've been running the Made Smarter Innovation Programme for the last 3 years, and we really are focusing on our vision of making supply chains more sustainable, resilient and efficient through digital technologies. And what was interesting for me is that I thought I'd sort of do a little bit of an AI chat, Gen AI discussion around what's the digital supply chain hub and why it's important. And what was interesting is that I put it into one of these Gen AI engines and it came back saying a digital supply chain hub is an innovation ecosystem that leverages digital technologies to optimize and transform supply chain operations. The Made Smarter Digital Supply Chain Hub, led by Digital Catapult, in the UK exemplifies this concept. And I'm thinking, that's good. Gen AI is now saying that we are the digital supply chain hub that matters. Also, I think, and Phil will pick up a bit of this, we ran a survey recently around 500 leaders of supply chain across the UK, both at an SME and larger level. And it's clear that the priorities that needed to be addressed in supply chains haven't changed much over the last 3 years. The top three things around building more efficient supply chains, building more resilient supply chains, and building supply chains that are more sustainable and addressing that whole challenge of measuring and reducing CO2 and carbon across the end-to-end supply chain. And it's also clear that digital is seen as critical to that driving that supply chain performance. That's not going away either. And in our survey, some 70% of organisations see this as an essential or a thing that they need to do in relation to addressing their digital supply chain. However, there are still significant barriers to adoption. And we need to overcome those to be able to address digital transformation. And interesting, the survey found that there were 3 areas: resources and skills, getting better processes, and the culture and ways of working, as the key themes that need to be addressed to drive adoption. And also interestingly, how do we get companies spending more on addressing digital supply chain technologies? I'm not sure I fully believe these numbers that came out, but large businesses are not spending a lot more than small businesses when they measure this in terms of the spend on adoption and how they're doing that. So what are we doing? As you know, we're doing 3 things in the Digital Supply Chain Innovation Hub. We're, first of all, working with organisations to drive innovation. We've got some 35 digital projects that we're working on. A number of those you'll hear about today, and there really are an interesting array of things that we're doing for organisations in the digital space. We're then deploying those in test beds, and you're going to hear, as I said earlier, from 2 of those test beds, from the hydrogen and circular test bed, as environments to test, try and understand the value of digital technologies within your potential organisation. And then finally, through our digital hub, supply chain hub, we're launching, which we launched in July, we're building and helping organisations with the adoption journey of understanding about digital right the way through using digital to deliver for their businesses. We are making significant progress. These are just some of the stats and impacts that we're driving across the hub. We've had already 14.3 million worth of industry investment into the programme. We have 38 new digital technologies being developed. And already we're getting some great results in terms of improving productivity and waste. We went through that in detail earlier on, but some of the numbers coming out are quite significant in terms of the opportunities that we see. And on top of that, technology companies who are part of this are being invested in. Whether that be off the back of the Digital Supply Chain Hub, whether that be through commercial contracts with industry organisations, or through investment from financial organisations who see the value and the benefit of digital technologies. And this is a great showcase for them to really drive that forward. We're now in the last 6 months of the programme, and obviously we're working hard on the plans to continue the programme post our funding window 24-25, and I'm happy to talk about those and the sorts of things we're doing as we go through the afternoon. So that's where we are, a little bit of an overview. I'm now going to pass over to Phil, who hopefully going to give us a bit of an outside-in perspective on where we should be going in relation to logistics and supply chains. Thanks, Phil.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you, Tim, and thank you to everybody for being here this afternoon. My name's Phil Rowe. I'm only called Philip by my mother when I'm in trouble. But actually, I'm here to talk a little bit about the broader challenges, and also to give a little bit of a logistics insight into both the digital debate, but also I think the challenges that we need to face into. I've been working here for Tim in the Catapult for a couple of years now, and I have to say it's been a huge learning experience for me. I'm not exactly what you would call a digital native, so we'll see how we get on today. So a little bit about my other job, which is I'm the president or non-exec chair of Logistics UK, which most of you haven't heard of. But Logistics UK represents the whole of the logistics industry, working across all sectors in the UK economy, working across people who operate logistics infrastructure, operate logistics services, but also retailers and manufacturers who actually buy logistics services as well. And with our 20-odd thousand members, what it allows us to see is to have a real broad view across the UK economy. And in scale, we're similar to the CBI, the British Retail Consortium, because of course the logistics industry is enormous. Everything in our economy is supported by logistics. 8% of the UK workforce work in the logistics sector, over 200,000 businesses, and most of them are SME businesses in their own right. So one of the things that we're really focused upon are economic challenges and how the country tackles the economic bind that I think it broadly finds itself in. I'm going to present this slide really in two bits. The first bit, the top 5, which I think are by our assessment of the big issues that face us from a economic point of view at the moment. And then the table and the bit at the bottom is actually what's really happening to us relative to competitor economies as a result of those top 5. So let's start with the 5 and start with the challenges that I think where digital solutions can actually really help both individual organisations but also the UK economy really drive forward. And trade is I guess the obvious one, and certainly the one at the industry leadership group this morning we probably talked about most. The political circumstances that we find ourselves in have disconnected many of our businesses from their markets. I think over 20,000 businesses that were trading in the EU before Brexit now are not, and that's having an impact within our economy. We've created complexity in terms of how we've exited, and there is a particularly powerful, I think, digital approach that is needed to that, and also to deal with future challenges, not least decarbonisation and compliance. Infrastructure in the UK is a real hotbed at the moment. You see it in the news. Only recently, are we going to spend money connecting to Euston? Are we going to build the new Thames crossing? Are we going to invest in other areas? But fundamentally, infrastructure for the UK economy is a critical investment. The choices that are made now, if they're followed through and not delayed for years and years, are going to be really important to the future of the economy and how we make our living. And so that's a big area for us. Decarbonisation is probably the biggest challenge of the age. Massive role for digital insight in connecting the users of energy with the providers for energy, and actually DC is already involved in some of those areas. Similarly with skills, and then probably resilience is one of the area that gets spoken about the most. And normally we talk about supply chain resilience and disconnection and the issues that have affected us. But actually, don't miss cybersecurity in this. One of the big inhibitors for people, Tim talked about adoption earlier on, is actually fears around cybersecurity and what might that mean, and what might investment in new areas mean to us as we go forward. The result of all that is that if you look at our relative performance, it's actually declined quite substantially. We were 4th in the World Bank Logistics Index only, 2013? We're now 19th. And that is not just our decline, but it's also the investments that other are making. And the work that we did with Oxford Economics showed that just correcting that position back to where we were could provide a growth stimulus of around £8 billion a year into the UK economy. So there is plenty here that is absolutely up for grabs. And I think one of the big differences about where we find ourselves now economically, the only way I think out of this is to be smarter. With the labour markets are really tight, energy costs are going up, so the factors of production are getting more expensive. So smartness, insight, making the right decisions has a real high value, more so than I think we've seen before. This is my kind of digital fraud slide, really, with my 2 years' experience at DC. But what I've seen in the projects that I've been involved in, and you're going to see some of these later on, has been some amazing examples of how digital innovation can help to tackle some of the problems that I described earlier on. How that we can use digital technology and process to create insight, to actually make the right decisions, to look across multiple sectors, and this is particularly true in decarbonisation, to make the right decisions about where to put our investment. We'll see a little bit of that later on. The interoperability piece, I think, is amazing. The ability to stop. At the moment, I call it sector speak. Everyone has their own abbreviations, everyone has their own lingo and language, and a lot of it is used to stop things happening. But actually, by making supply chains interoperable, you take away these blind spots, and actually you allow businesses to work across sectors, across borders, along supply chains. And I think that's a huge value for the UK economy. There's clearly a boost to efficiency through tackling waste. Using test beds, which I think you guys do brilliantly, is a wonderful way of allowing people to experiment and to de-risk and reduce the cost of change, and also to enable collaboration. I think the other thing as well is that digital is itself a growth sector. So the ability to grow our digital solutions to become world leading in the areas that we choose to play creates itself an export growth engine, because demand for digital solutions exists all the way across the globe and all the way across the developed world. So for me, there's a lot of excitement about what digital can do. However, and Tim showed the however earlier on, if we develop it but don't use it, or if we develop it and then businesses are too busy or too frightened, perhaps, to adopt what could be done, then we're not going to be any further forward. And unfortunately, if you, as an economic historian, if you look back over the last 200 or 300 years, the UK is quite good at not adopting things. And that's not a challenge that we can fall now, because our other routes to economic success have narrowed down on us. And just these are my own observations as I look across businesses of all different sizes in all different sectors across the UK. I think if I start at the two ends of that table that's on the slide, to get to an SME audience is really, really difficult, and it needs to be local. And it needs to be very, very tight messaging about what could be done for your business. And I think the work that DC has been doing in this area is starting to meet that challenge. And I think we were talking earlier on about, for example, what's going on in Northern Ireland, about as a way of doing this. But to get to an SME audience is fundamentally different than to getting to a large company audience, where I think the focus needs to be at the other end, and you need to focus on the really, really big issues. But at the heart of this, the industrial strategy, which we're all waiting for, and none of us have seen really, has to be underpinned by the use of digital technology. And that's where the investment should go, because boosting the digital capability of the UK economy across its sectors, across its large organisations and across its small organisations is going to go a long way to determining the economic success of this country as we look forward over the next 15 years. So thank you very much for your time today. And now you're actually going to see some of the stuff that the guys have been doing, and I hope you enjoy your day. Thank you.
That was brilliant. Thanks, Phil. It's a really good context for what we're talking about. I think maybe one of our other metrics should be how we move from 19th back up to 4th or whatever in the global rankings on logistics out of the hub. But I'm now going to sort of pass over to Tim, who's going to introduce our panel, talking about transforming UK manufacturing through the innovation in our test beds. Yeah. So, Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be able to introduce our panel today. So if you'll welcome them to the stage, I'll do a quick kind of name check introduction. Hopefully, yeah, we can put the names on the slide as well. So in no particular order, Mark Presto. Mark is from Circle 8, and he's leading the textiles test bed that Tim mentioned before. Circle 8, Mark, are giving their sort of focus and attention towards creating an advanced textile recycling and sorting facility in the UK. How's that? So give a hand to Mark. Next up, we've got Siwa Cheng, who's from the hydrogen test bed and Hydrologic. So Hydrologic, they work in non-road mobile machinery, so things like think generators, that type of thing, and how to convert those from old diesel to new hydrogen. So, and as I mentioned, also leading the hydrogen test bed. So give Sue a hand. And last but not least, we've got Sue Fairley, who's the Senior Head of ESG, Quality and Sourcing at New Look. And as well as her role there, Sue is helping us as really the industry voice in some of the projects you're going to hear about later on, really focused on kind of sustainable textile supply chains. So give Sue a hand. So firstly, we're going to start with Mark. So Mark, just to give some context, would you just explain what the textile testbed is, sure, and how it sort of fits into the bigger picture of the sector?
Are you going to?
Yeah, I think we've got an explainer on the first slide.
It's okay. Great. Yeah, excellent. So maybe we can start off with the bad news and then move to the good news. The bad news is that the textile supply chain worldwide, and I'm really going to focus more on apparel, but more broadly, is one of the most polluting. Can you hear me now? Great. Yeah. Is one of the most polluting sectors worldwide and a major cause for climate change. The good news is that a circular supply chain for textiles can help mitigate that and reduce that impact significantly, and particularly one in the UK. The supply chain, as far as the UK is concerned, setting aside non-woven sectors and certainly some businesses in apparel, but predominantly in terms of impact and volumes, the UK participates in the supply chain mostly towards the end, i.e. Import, sell, use, and unfortunately mostly dispose of textiles. In fact, over 700,000 tons per annum of textiles are considered and treated as waste rather than a viable resource, which they are. And in fact, with a circular supply chain, those textile wastes, particularly predominantly cotton and polyester, can be turned into new fiber and used to make new apparel, new textiles. And that's exactly what Circle 8 and this test bed is really focused on. What are the digital tools that can help us achieve that? And towards that end, in addition to, of course, the capital investment that's required in the circular textile supply chain, there is a digital investment, and there's great opportunities. Because for the circular supply chain to, if you will, overcome the linear one, it has to differentiate itself, and it has to certainly avoid any claims of greenwashing. And so it has to be very highly accountable for all aspects of the supply chain. And in our particular case, for the test bed, we have 3 solutions that are related to that. And you'll see them in the table on the right there: sustainability, transparency, integrity, and efficiency. And as you'll hear from all the solutions, Looper and Made By and Lodar are the ones that we worked with. Tim?
Great. Excuse me. Great, thank you, Mark. Yeah, no bigger kind of reason that we shouldn't be focused on circular supply chains than 700,000 tons of material going to waste. That's sort of staggering scale. So, Siwa, coming on to you, would you give us an idea of the hydrogen test bed, what its goals are, and how that fits into the hydrogen, in the new emerging sector of hydrogen?
So the purpose of the hydrogen testbed is to allow supply chain members to be able to explore and interact with the supply chain virtually, and to see how to understand supplier dependencies, to see how information flows across the supply chain. And this is particularly important for the hydrogen industry because at this early stage of our market, a lot of this information, the relationships, the data are not very well defined. So our ultimate goal is to encourage more collaboration between producers and consumers to accelerate the use of hydrogen to decarbonize multiple industries. And to build the supply chain, we started with doing a series of supply chain mapping exercises. We then defined an ontology, a set of data standards, and then we built a graph database to capture real-world market relationships, market data, technical data, as well as real-world demand data from Hydrologic, our own IoT system. And this graph data is then made available via our public API.
Brilliant, thanks, Siwa. So as you can see, the test beds themselves are the multi-tier data environments and sort of sandbox environments where we can utilize that kind of infrastructure, that data set to really test the value of solutions that the developers are working on, and we'll come on to that in the next set of presentations. So coming on to you, Sue. So from your industry perspective, Sue, so why are the test beds important, and how can they help you achieve your goals?
Well, they're hugely important. We're part of a number of test beds, but this one in particular, it shows the connectivity and the ways in which we can actually use the data that we're actually gathering with our own industry, with our own businesses, to actually explore and scenario plan, to make the right decisions at the end of the day. And that's something that we've really enjoyed being part of. I think I spoke at what's really great about an event like this is actually, I think I said to my husband this morning, I'm sitting on a panel today and it's something to do with hydrogen technology. And he was like, oh my gosh, how did you go from making suits in the Northeast to talking about hydrogen technology? And he said, I'm not really sure. But actually what actually this tells me is that actually the connectivity within our industry, and I sit and I talk, I've just had a conversation with a number of people before we came into the room today, and actually we are all really connected. We're all thinking about the same million things. And, you know, I was just listening to your introduction, our keynote this morning. You know, all the things you were talking about are all the things that we're trying to scenario plan for. You know, the movement of our goods, the logistics operations, the way in which we account for the carbon in our value chain. So I represent a company called New Look. It's a fashion brand, and you know, we move goods largely from Southeast Asia. We've hit some major humps in the road in the last year, but actually demonstrating, we applied for our science-based targets and had them validated earlier this year. And if you'd asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have kind of like, I've no idea really, you know, the data that we had and what we could actually do with it. What I'm now really proud of is that actually in preparing for what we've got coming down the tunnel at us, basically, the legislation, the European legislation in the first instance, and trying to avoid being devolved in any way, basically, from larger Europe because of the legislation, which is going to affect us. We supply into the UK economy, but additionally, we are suppliers into partners in Europe, and therefore any kind of diversification of our own legislation, etc., and our own requirements away from Europe is obviously a bit of a challenge for us. So we are literally taking the European pathway, I would say, on most of this legislation, and being able to use the data, using the scenario planning to be able to identify not only where the carbon intensity, but not only the carbon intensity, but other impacts are. You're going to hear, I think, later on about digital product passports. That's just one element of trying to identify how we're going to have to ingest data, and we're ingesting data from so many places to be able to then spit it out in very many different formats. So whether that's customer facing, whether that's being able to, you know, plan our logistics operations, whether that's to be able to identify, you know, our circular economy route. So from my point of view, being involved in this is a comfortable way in which we can start and plan for the future in all of the elements that we're involved with as far as circular economy is concerned, but most importantly about making sure we're making the right decisions that are going to have the longer term impact. Last week we spoke at the UKFT and we were talking about the circular economy and being able to turn non-wearable textiles back into usable raw materials. That's obviously what we want to do, is to actually, what impact is that going to have from a carbon perspective as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Sue. And yeah, that ability to use and share the data and feel confident in that, I think, is something that you've found important in the testbed approach.
Absolutely. Sorry if I went a little bit off track there. So yes. So what I should have said was that actually when I had my arm bent by, I think it was Ben, after a global compact meeting, and he was like, so
you're not the only person in the room who's experienced that.
You need to come and talk to us about this. And I was like, I didn't no idea who Digital Catapult are, but actually it was as part of a solution. You put us in touch with some really smart guys who are going to talk to you from Looper around being able to identify how our data, which is in a pretty good state, but probably not in the most perfect state for what we want to do, but actually how we can use that data to create the test beds that you need to be able to map this. Yeah, brilliant.
Fabulous, thanks, Sue. So, Siwa, coming back to you, hydrogen is an emerging supply chain. So, what kind of challenges does that bring to you, and how are you addressing them?
So, the biggest issue that we are seeing is supply and demand. As with any early stage market, we are seeing a bit of a chicken and egg situation. So suppliers of hardware or producers of fuel, they're hesitating to invest unless they can see customer commitment. And on the other hand, customers are not committing to the use of hydrogen unless they know that the hardware and the fuel supply is going to be reliable. So a way to solve this problem is by, as Sue mentioned, sharing data, making the data more easily available throughout the supply chain. So we started collecting market data, and then we soon found out that actually in the hydrogen market, the data tends to be not very standardized or even just not easily available. So To overcome that, we started by creating a set of data standards, which then allowed us to identify the crucial supply chain information required to move hydrogen effectively from the producer to the consumers. And in the end, we created an application on top of the testbed to allow supply and demand scenarios to be simulated and visualized. And with that information, the producers and the consumers can then work together to plan hydrogen projects together.
Thanks, Siwa. And I saw Mark nodding along in that. So, Mark, the textile supply chain is not yet circular. That's it's still very linear. So, what are the challenges that gives you and the rest of the consortium, and how are you dealing with them?
Right. So I was particularly nodding at the chicken and egg, because it seems like all emerging supply chains, they have this issue, and that's a metaphor we use quite commonly at Circulate. And it was part of the issue, the basis for a parallel grant by Innovate UK for the ACT project, which is a project, a grant to help kickstart the design and building of the processing facility that'll take these post-use textiles within the UK and sort them by textile type, and then and pre-process them so they can be made into either recycled or downcycled. And I mentioned that because as a segue to this, because I guess we started off this project with higher ambitions as to what the data availability would be. And unfortunately, I must confess that having worked at a previous plant in India where we did a very detailed environmental analysis and we had every single piece of granular data, I knew we wouldn't get that, but I thought we would still have more than what we ended up with. And so we've had to improvise as a result of that. And for proving out the applications and the use cases and so on, we've synthesized data. And we've actually reverse engineered, working, for example, with Looper, because they have access to environmental databases, to sort of say, okay, for this garment, this Oxford blouse or whatever, what would be the detailed process, working again with our supply chain and Sue and her team to figure out what that would be if we could get the data from every single factory. And the challenge is that, quite frankly, and this will come, but the way the testbed can help overcome this is the real resistance is a fewfold. First of all, a lot of LCA data and other data is competitively very sensitive. So you need a testbed that has permission controls, et cetera. And so I think part of our exercise was working through that, again, at small samples of synthesized data, but still absolutely critical. The second is that they're remote, they're far away, and every factory is getting requests for 50 or 75 or 100, at least LCA reports on a particular garment that was made in a particular way. So you need to have things as user-friendly as possible. And the third is, which I didn't fully appreciate, and isn't so much the case with New Look, but with other apparel companies, they have an extensive dependence on intermediaries that handle more of the orders and the supply chains, et cetera. So the data is then once again further removed, and you almost wonder whether some of those intermediaries have a business interest in not sharing the data so much. But all of that, so what we did was we pulled back from trying to have applications that were 3-tier, and then we focused in on specific applications for example, for the LCA, and for the logistics, we're focusing on using that to optimize the collection of the non-wearable textiles.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark. It's no accident that you'll hear a lot more about this problem of data sharing and the infrastructure behind it in some of the sessions we've got later on in the second half. So that's a real theme later on. Okay, conscious of time. So Sue, coming back to you, what are the key challenges that you're facing in now and in the next few years, and where might digital technology help?
So, I think the biggest challenges that we're facing really are there's much pressure for placing less on the market, and much pressure on making sure that what we do place on the market is more responsible. So actually being able to measure the impact of the way in which we do business is becoming more and more important. And it's important to the consumer, it's important to the regulators. It's important to many places, being able to even to cross borders. It's going to become important. So the challenge for me at the moment, for us at the moment, really is how we. I think actually, again, coming back to the keynote speech, basically, it's how you balance trade with acting responsibly and being able to reduce your impact. So the decarbonisation, the transparency, the circularity of the business are all going to depend on us making some really smart decisions, which are affected from the minute you actually place the order, not once it's actually on the water and on its way to you. So actually joining all of that up and being able to, scenario plan for the materials we use, being able to get materials back into circulation, and being able to reduce the impacts of the ways in which we do business are going to be really key. The markets are changing massively. All the curveballs we've had thrown at us are just the start of it, basically. Climate change is going to affect the way and where and how our products are produced, what raw materials we're using, the new innovations, basically, that are going to replace some of the thirsty crops that need to be used at the moment, and the pressure on not using fossil fuels. I think we'll all be sitting here naked, quite frankly, if we, unless we come up with some really, really smart solutions, basically. So, and all of that is requiring data to decide, what are the smart decisions. I've been learning so much through this LCA process. LCAs have been around for a long time. Normally it costs us about 10 or 20, it can cost you 10 or 15 grand basically to get one single LCA, and it's only as good as the absolute scenario that you're actually measuring at any one point in time. Trying to do that kind of analysis at scale, at speed, because obviously we do things quickly, is going to rely on some really smart technologies.
Brilliant, thanks, Sue. So there's a theme, isn't there, that the smart use of data is actually going to unlock some of the business, some of the bigger societal and business challenges that we're facing, in the years to come. Amazing. So I'm getting the sort of sign that says stop. So I think it just remains for me to thank the panel for the insights. It's been great to hear from you all. I could talk to you for ages, so but I'm not allowed.
So we're now moving into the sort of first set of tech solutions, really those that are supporting these two test beds, so hydrogen and textiles, and we can start to see how those solutions are addressing some of the challenges that were pointed out just now. So I'm going to start off by inviting Malt, from Hurus Energy, up to talk about the work they've been doing in the hydrogen test bed here. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Thank you for having me. My name is Malte. I'm one of the co-founders of Hurus Energy. And today I'll talk to you a little bit about the challenges in the green hydrogen industry. We've heard a little bit about it already. And talk about the solution that we've built with the help of the Digital Supply Chain Hub. We're building a techno-economic modeling tool for the green hydrogen industry. We've used the testbed that the hydrologic team has built together with the Digital Supply Chain Hub, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how that will help the industry. We started the company with a mission to simplify the path for industry to evaluate and deploy low-carbon energy projects. What that means is we're helping businesses build business cases and figure out how they can use solutions such as green hydrogen technology, electrolyzers, batteries, and any form of energy storage to help decarbonize their business and drive down energy costs. With this program, we've focused very specifically on electrolyzers, mainly due to kind of the impact that can have, the chicken and egg problem that's been talked about, and trying to accelerate the supply side of the green hydrogen market. Now, taking a step back, why does green hydrogen matter? Hydrogen is used in a number of industries. Generally, if you want to decarbonize your energy mix, you have the option to electrify or to use green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is particularly suited to heavy industries where electrification is very difficult. So hydrogen is used in producing fertilizer, for example, in shipping in the form of methanol and ammonia, in aviation, and as ENG for industrial heat. So what's holding back adoption? What's the problem? We thought about this a little bit. Again, in our view, like an intransparent market, a lack of data, very difficult to price, to forecast costs of such a project are a big factor. We found out that only 4% of projects, electrolyzer projects, ever actually get to a final investment decision. So that means that most green hydrogen projects kind of end before they've even started. So when we found this out, we decided to do something about it and try to help this problem in the form of a techno-economic modeling tool that allows developers to kind of simulate the whole project and get up-to-date, accurate data on what it would cost in order to be able to make a financial investment decision. In our web app, you can see some screens up on the projector. Users can enter a few pieces of basic information about their proposed project and get answers in seconds. We've built this application with data from the hydrogen testbed built by Hydrologic, who you've heard about from SIWA, and with the input of our green hydrogen project development partners, such as Simon from Hydrogenous, who's also here today. Digital Catapult was instrumental in making this project happen by bringing together industry customers, experts, and building the testbed in the first place. So working with these partners that we met through the program gave us access to the data and expertise we needed to build and validate our product. So big thank you to all the partners who are here today. If you're interested in decarbonizing your business, learn more about techno-economic modeling for green hydrogen projects, please stop by our booth. Happy to give you a demo of the tool. Thank you for your time. Back to you, Tim.
That's great. Any questions you want to ask, please pick them up afterwards or in the break. I think we're moving through these at a fairly rapid rate. Okay, that's good, I can hear. So we're now going to move into one of the textile testbed innovations made by. I'm going to ask Rika, to come up and talk about it. So hi, Rika.
Sure. Hi everyone, nice to be here. I'm Rika Olli, the head of circularity and project lead for the DPP part of the testbed initiative. So Made By is a platform that builds digital product passport and digital ID capabilities for brands and businesses that are looking to scale and transform within the circular economy. And our SaaS platform basically works on product data all the way from what we sort of call static data, so everything that is, you can hear me, okay, sorry for that. I'll try to keep it here. So we collect and share data that is linked to the static information of a product data, so everything that is materials, origins of the product, and information, for example, on care instructions or repair instructions, all the way to what we call dynamic data, so all the events that can happen in the circular economy, such as resale, repair, all the way to the end-of-life processes. The data collection is enabled through what we call data carriers. So those data carriers can be QR codes, NFC, or RFID tags or tracers. And our solution is agnostic, so we can work with any type of data carrier. So I guess this is something what we've said many times today. The data is very often scattered, stored in various places, held by many different departments. So it's very difficult to get a structured, holistic view on managing the data. Within the digital product passport, we basically have stakeholders there on the upper side that bring data to the digital product passport, and then on the lower part, sort of those people that need to access the data or bring data to the DPP. So our approach is that we're trying to streamline these data cycles so that hopefully it will look something more like here. So the key driver for the DPP, like Sue was mentioning before, is the European Union's ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Products initiative, that is already set in motion this year, actually back in July. Specifically for DPP, we're looking at next year. So depending on the product category, the legislation is coming, and it is impacting a lot of businesses. What is specific with the ESPR is that it's really looking at the transition towards circular economy and circularity, and making use of products for longer life cycles. So this is commitment that Made By is really committed to. So working with the testbed has had these, let's say, 3 key benefits for us. So obviously that collaborative testbed ecosystem has really helped us to sort of hone our DPP preparedness and capabilities. And secondly, the EPR is actually another legislation that there's a lot of sort of overlap with the data. So together with our sponsor, QSA Partners, we've been able to look at those data sets very closely, and that has been great. So for us, what is very important moving forward is this life cycle events at unit level management, because we believe that that will be a key sort of driver for the whole industry to come to that circular ecosystem and circular economy. So with this, we feel that we're quite ready now to deliver 2 benefits for brands and businesses. So one is this regulatory side of things, starting off with the DPP, following by these different other regulatory aspects, and then looking at this circularity and really driving more value, profitability out of the circular business models as resale. So if these things speak to you, come and see our demo and talk to us at the end. There's also a QR code that you can read that shows you sort of the customer-facing side of the DPP if you're interested. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thanks. Right, we're going to now move into the world of Looper, yeah, who are focusing on the I think life cycle analysis, if I'm right. So I don't know if the Looper team are here. Yeah. No, I'm just are the Looper team here or not?
Well, they are, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to move on to? Are they here now? Yeah. You're too busy. Hi. Hi, guys. Jen. Yeah. Are you ready, guys?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Great. Okay.
Cool.
Hi everyone, I'm Yichang, and this is Sash. We are the 2 co-founders of Looper. There you go. Can you hear me? Perfect. Hi everyone, I'm Yichang, and this is Sash. We are 2 co-founders of Looper. And Looper is a lifecycle assessment software. We help companies design the lifecycle of their product. And today we're going to talk about how we unlock the power of this product lifecycle data within textile industry. First, let's take an example of a t-shirt. I think from the medium, from the market, from the clients, from the government, many people are having this question: how much carbon come out from this t-shirt? So I'd like all of us to think about why this information is important. Here are some background. 2 billion t-shirts were sold globally every year. And that's equivalent to around 13.5 tons of carbon emission. And that's only for t-shirt. We have jacket, we have jeans, we have coats. Actually, textile product take in charge around 10% of global carbon emission. That's a huge number and influence. Then from customer perspective, around 67% of the consumer, they treat sustainability as a key buying factor, which means customers, they like to buy sustainable products. And also, from government perspective, there are several EU regulations are coming. So as a business, to provide this product level carbon emission information is not just about, we are trying to save the world. Now it's also about protect your business and define the new growth. Then, how we calculate the carbon emission of this t-shirt. The science behind this is called life cycle assessment. We call that LCA. It's a scientific way to quantify the environmental impact of a product through its whole life cycle. And currently, this process is very time-consuming and expensive. First, based on cost, traditional LCA consultant will take at least £4,000 per product, and all the data collection will take at least 1 month. Second, typically companies, they don't have the LCA specialist, in-house. And the problem happened when they're trying to update the calculation, when the design change, when their supply chain change. And this is a clear observation of lack of knowledge gap. And finally, around 60% of the climate impact data is still not available yet. Wrong assumptions can lead to a huge calculation error. That's why we are developing this next-gen LCA software. We want to make sure the solution is easy to deploy and scalable. And Sash will talk about how Looper works. Sash.
Thank you. Great. So at Looper, we are developing a software which is the future of lifecycle assessment. So how it works? Users, they log into Looper and they get welcome to a whiteboard environment. So in this whiteboard environment, they simply need to specify the name of the product, and the software automatically generates a blueprint of the production process. So the customers can then modify this blueprint, reflecting changes which shows how the production process works in their industry, in their practice. And then based on that, in real time, the software calculates all the climate impact assessment results in the background. So previously, this step would take several weeks, but with consultants, a lot of back and forth information exchange. But now, based on real-time modification of this process map, they can see real-time those results appearing. Also, our software provides a platform for a lot of what-if analysis and optioneering. So many times, business, they have ideas of how they can implement some low carbon solutions in practice, but they don't know how would that reflect on their carbon footprint or water usage. But now with the optioneering platform, they can perform these results and perform the implementations and see the results in real time. So overall, Looper's automated AI-powered solution helps customers run a really quick, scalable LCA solution at much reduced cost. Secondly, customers, they don't need to bring a lot of LCA-specific specialist knowledge to when they work on the software, because the software does all the heavy lifting in the background. And number three, our intuitive digital canvas allows for seamless integration with supply chain, making sure the data unavailability problem is solved. So in our current project with Digital Catapult, we are working with New Look together with the testbed comprising of Circulate, Entropy, and Responsive. The testbed provides an excellent opportunity for us to speed up and accelerate the supply chain integration part, and helps to Looper software to get access to all the complex, vast network of data coming from the supply chain, and making sure all the data is secure and kept confidential. With New Look, our goal is to run scalable LCA solution for over several thousands of their products and speed up the calculation process from weeks to hours, and generate data insights from hours to seconds, and make sure that the supply chain engagement is stable and secure. Previously, this would take several months, even years, or sometimes it's not even existent, to now it's possible within a few days. So that's all for our presentation.
We are looking for collaboration and partnerships. If what we are doing is interesting to you all, please let's have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, great. So now the last for this session, but by no means least, I hope, LODAR. So I'm going to invite Katrina up to talk about what they've been doing in relation to logistics.
So, yes, I'm Katrina Haskins and I'm the Head of Commercial for LODAR and also the project lead. And we are a logistics procurement and management platform committed to making transport more efficient, cost-effective and sustainable. Our goal is simple: to streamline logistics processes, optimise operations for both the shippers and the carriers, and to reduce environmental impacts while saving money. So, our systems provide effective solutions to the most pressing logistics challenges out there at the moment, ensuring benefits to both businesses and to the environment. Through our dynamic pricing model, we can optimise costs across trusted carriers to cut your cost by 15%. We can reduce your empty miles, increase truck fill to slash your CO2 emissions. We can stay in control of your fleet, your management, your tracking, your visibility, all from our online platform. You can maximise savings with market-driven prices from trusted carriers, and all of your workflows, schedules, communications are automated for a seamless experience. So we wanted to join the project to tackle critical logistic challenges at the moment, specifically within the recycled textile sector, where 26% of vehicle miles run empty. Logistics costs account for between 10 and 15% of manufacturers' expenses, and there's a lot of siloed processes within procurement and operations that don't work together. And these inefficiencies created an opportunity for innovation that aligns with our capabilities at LODAR. Initially, our plan was to enhance and focus more on the logistics pricing engine that we have in place already and to develop that further. However, we started to work with ShredStation and we discovered that they had their own fleet for recycling and shredding. So this meant we had to pivot the approach that we had initially from the pricing engine side, shifting it to more about route optimization and fleet utilisation. Our goal was to help ShredStation maximise their load capacity, reduce their costs and to lower emissions. This collaboration allowed us to refine our technology so that we can now support all kinds of shippers out there and help them reach their environmental and economic goals. So what we built as part of the project, we have a dynamic route planner that was built specifically for ShredStation, which can optimise delivery routes, helping businesses reduce their carbon footprint and improve efficiencies. There we have a CO2 reporting suite added to our deck of reports that can help businesses track their emissions and measure their environmental impacts, promoting accountability and sustainability. The fleet utilisation tool maximises load capacity, reduces empty miles and enables logistic operators and manufacturers to significantly lower operational costs. And while we were at it, we enhanced the dynamic pricing engine that we already have in place to cover a fuller range of ways of purchasing and procuring your transport. So we already have a number of current customers using the pricing system, and we've seen benefits from those customers by doing a number of case studies with them where we can save on average a 15% on the transport costs through the dynamic pricing model. We've seen a 70% increase in operational efficiencies in these businesses and approximately a 5% reduction in CO2 emissions. We've actually recently done another case study on one of our key accounts up to the end of August, and the reduction is increased on the costing side to 16.8 and on the emission side to 5.25 year on year to the end of August. At ShredStation, we have implemented the route planner. We have shown, this has shown us early success already around lowering those emissions and reducing the number of empty miles that they have. And the testbed has helped to provide us with an invaluable insight into confirming that we have the ability to adapt to those needs as and when necessary, and to help manufacturers to measure these. These are the top line figures again, and we continue to evolve with every customer that we deal with every manufacturer that we bring on board. And we also want to work a lot more with some more logistic providers and more manufacturers to reduce the environmental impact. So if you want to talk to me about some of the figures that we have here, if you want to see a demo of how the system works, then please come and chat to me after the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody. I think you'll agree 3 quite different use cases, but really important areas of addressing, whether it be product passporting, life cycle analysis, or the financial implications of making decisions around buying an asset and getting into green hydrogen. Really interesting. We're now moving into the second half of the session, where we're going to talk about the work we've been doing in the flagship projects. Yeah. So I'm going to hand over to Kingsley Harding, who's our Head of Solution Architecture at Digital Catapult, to talk about how the flagships have come together and introduce them. Thanks, Kingsley.
Cool, thank you, Tim. Cool. Welcome everyone to the second part of the afternoon. So as Tim said, so I'm Kingsley, Head of Solution Architecture at Digital Catapult, and been working with the Digital Supply Chain Hub for the last 3 years. So this section is about the flagships and some of the projects that we've been running as part of the Digital Supply Chain Hub. But just to set some context for that, we're just going to go over or give an outline of the program as a whole to see where they kind of fit into the program. So from the outset, we worked with industry to identify some industry challenges, of which there were 7 that were identified, and those are the ones that are up on the screen at the moment. Those 7 challenges essentially kind of roll up into the kind of the 3 key themes that we've been working with through the program. And then we have what we call our innovation layer. So this is the layer of all the projects that we are running through the Digital Supply Chain Hub, of which there's quite a range. And then those kind of fit into the test beds, of which we've kind of heard some discussion around the test beds and the purpose of the test beds and the value that they've been delivering as part of the earlier section. And then finally, we have what we call the adoption layer, and this is primarily around the Digital Supply Chain Hub platform that we will talk about a little bit later today. One of the key things that I want to highlight here is just the difference between some of the projects and the project types that we've been running, and this is very pertinent to the question around kind of flagships and what flagships are about. So primarily there are 2 different types of projects that we've been running. One is around the flexible funding open calls. So these are the orange projects that are displayed in that innovation layer, and then we have the flagship projects. And the key distinction between the 2 project types is that the open call projects are generally kind of like smaller. They're a sort of technology provider working with an industry partner to solve a specific challenge. The flagship projects are much bigger in scope, so they're consortium based. They generally run for a longer period of time, and as Tim kind of touched on right at the beginning, they generally try and address a slightly kind of thornier issue related to supply chains than can be addressed in the kind of the smaller open calls. So that's primarily the kind of the difference in what a flagship project is. So out of those 7 challenges that we identified right back at the beginning, then like looking at those, and kind of when we were looking at those at the beginning of the program, we kind of identified that actually supply chain collaboration, which is one of those 7 challenges, actually that's a bit of an enabling theme. It's a bit of an underpinning kind of capability here. And I think that's been drawn out by a lot of the discussion that we've had so far today about collaboration is essentially the flow of information across supply chain, the ability to share data. And out of the discussions we've had today, then lots of that is focused on being able to share data amongst different participants in the supply chain. And I think that through the 3 years that we've been running the digital supply chain and all of the discussions that we've had in relation to that, lots of them, or this kind of idea about collaboration and working across the supply chain with your partners has resonated, and that's come up in pretty much every discussion that we've had. But one discussion really kind of stands out for me, and that was when I was, talking very someone was talking to me very passionately about if they could get more information from their supply chain partners, then they could, do a much better job at their, digital supply chain, and it would, have huge benefits. And this was right back at, near the beginning of the program, so it was like fantastic. We are going to be running lots of innovation projects over the course of this program. We would love to work with you. We'd love you to work on a project where you share your data with, your supply chain partners, and they share their data with you. And they were just like, oh, okay. No, that's not what I meant. I meant that your partners would be sharing their information with me. I don't want to share information with my partners. And I think that's kind of, the fundamental, or one of the fundamental cruxes around, what we're trying to address, and particularly what we're trying to address around, the supply chain collaboration. And I think one of the elements there, if you kind of go, okay, why are people so reluctant to share information? I think the default response that we generally get back is, well, it's commercially sensitive. We don't want to, we can't allow that information kind of out into the wild, and that's very possibly the case. But actually, I think that sort of skips over some of the kind of the detail here. So if we think about supply chain collaboration as information flow and data sharing, then actually when you start unpacking that, there's a lot in there. So it's a really big space. It's a really big area. And this is a kind of a graphic that I've stolen from the European data spaces. It's a representation of what information sharing and supply chain collaboration kind of might involve. So in there, key distinction really is that the fact that there's the kind of the business side and the technical side. So a lot of it, the discussions that we have is around, technically how do you make it happen? And it's like, actually that's not that tricky. We've managed to put in place solutions that allow kind of data sharing, possibly not at scale, but we allow that. But actually there's a lot to do on the business side. So identifying the use case and what the value is that can be extracted from that. And that goes a long way to addressing things like the commercial sensitivity of sharing information, because if you're going to get value back, then you're more likely to kind of share information to allow that. And points around, kind of governance, so governance around, particularly around the data and how that's shared and being able to have kind of, sort of confidence in that. So the reason why I'm kind of talking about this is this plays very much into a lot of the flagship projects and kind of what they've been looking at, and they're kind of, sort of different guises really. And if we think again about supply chain collaboration as this ability to share information, then we can kind of almost sort of reframe some of the kind of questions or the way that we look at some of these questions. So one of them being this element around business operate in a competitive environment. So actually, is there a way where collaboratively working with your partners can provide you or that business with a competitive advantage, and things in there around being able to share information in a kind of a selective way, in a permissioned way, while still maintaining kind of ownership. So you're not just giving away information for others to use. There's another kind of element around if our supply chain partners are going to be building elements of our component that we're going to be putting together, actually they're possibly in a better position to do some of the design work for that. So can we leverage that expertise and bring that into the kind of processes or the way that we're working? But in order to do that, then that requires a really sophisticated way of sharing models down the supply chain and being able to work in a sort of kind of real-time way, which is a huge challenge. And then the third thing they're going to highlight here is around the point of visibility. So again, a lot of the times when we kind of talk about supply chains and how organizations can work better, they go, well, I need visibility of my supply chain. And often what they're saying is that we need to map my supply chain. I need to know who's in my supply chain. But actually, if you are thinking about information flow, if you're thinking about kind of data, then do you actually need to know who is in your supply chain? Or actually, do you just need an answer to a business question? So for example, if we kind of take scope 3 emissions, do you need to know all of the participants in your supply chain, or do you just need to have trust that the information that's provided back from your supply chain is kind of verifiable, is the right answer, and provides you with the answer for what your scope 3 emissions are. So there's a kind of sort of different ways of looking at this kind of when we start thinking about or kind of sort of reframe this kind of collaboration kind of piece. So I'm going to bring back to the program on a page. So there are 3 projects that we're going to be focusing on today. One is the Network Insight Collaboration Environment. The other one is the Connected MBEE project. Those 2 we describe as kind of fitting in the collaboration kind of space. But to show how collaboration actually kind of stretches across the supply chain, the Logistics Living Lab, which is the other project that we're going to be talking about, we describe as not being in the collaboration space, but in the logistics space, even though it is also addressing collaboration. So, with that said, I will hand over to the first project, which is Esther. So, Esther, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Nice meeting you all. And so I'm Esther, and I'm a product owner at Digital Catapult. So we will begin. And today we're going to talk about something really critical. So critical minerals in sharing data in supply chain. So that's really important. So firstly, imagine that we get all our insights we need. We have trust, we have transparency, and all without not compromising security. And I think that's really important, everyone's dream and all that. However, now in digital world where we are in now, it's actually really critical for us to actually have that. And it's not really a dream anymore. And it's really the backbone. So I've heard a lot talking about how do we do data sharing, how do we do it efficiently, and that's a really important thing to build responsible supply chains as well as reactive ones as well. So a little bit of a summary from what Phil's amazing keynote was. We have limited data visibility, which is what's one of the bigger things that's stopping us. It's not about accessing the data, it's more about how do we actually get the insights from it, so that's something else. Trust and security, so how do we actually not allow the people down in the suppliers to be thinking, oh, are we going to misuse their data in some way? They don't want their data to be floating around, possibly being exposed. Lack of collaboration incentives. Kingsley had a good start on that. There might be no incentives for people to share their data at some point, but unless they actually see the value in that. And last but not least, regulatory changes and all that. There's a lot of changes going on, geopolitical or different regulations that are coming up. So something that we heard about the EU battery regulation that's coming up in 2030, which is, are we really ready for that? Is like the biggest question for the entire supply chain. So when we look at it, when we look at the wants and the fears of people, client businesses, they want reliable data, how to mitigate risks, and real-time visibility, and all because they want to make better and more informed decisions. But at the same time, suppliers, they really fear, oh, are you going to misuse my data? Are you going to share my data out there? I'm going to lose my competitive edge. And I think that's something that's shared around a lot of suppliers, why they don't want to share their data. So here we are, the middle layer. So as we call it, the peacekeeper, I guess, the very nice solution. So in our project, Critical Minerals, the objective of it is to build a POC or a proof of concept to show, like, how do we govern and incentivize data insight sharing in especially the critical mineral supply chain. So a longer version of this would be, we are doing a shared distributed agent-based mechanism, which allows trusted interfacing with multiple supply chain data sources, with variable data sources, quality, of course, so enabling at least we get the value that we drive from it, so the insights that we really need from it, whilst also preserving privacy. And I think that's really important, that we get the insights as well as we keep our own private data. So how does that actually work? For example, if we're on the top layer, that it could be OEMs of client businesses, they really just want to ask questions because they want to answer back. So you just send a query down to NICE, our layer. So NICE will process the query and identify, is this really real? Is this a company that their identity is verified and so on? So you're actually making sure everyone is the right people in the supply chain that you want to share this with. And then next is the data still keeps and stays in the data provenance platforms of the supplier systems themselves. However, they could send this back, and then whilst the data is still with them, NICE will process the insights and return to the client businesses. And I think that's really important in that we are actually getting the insights, and that's, at the end of the day, why we are asking questions to the supply chain. So 4 parts of this NICE solution. One is digital identity management. So we wanted people who are participating are trusted and they are really who they are. Secondly is intelligent agent querying. To make it more easy for everyone, we want to ask really complex questions, but sometimes you just really want one answer. So instead, we actually have an intelligent agent querying model. So it's a way of, you ask a simple question, it would process to whoever who needs that needs to answer that, and then you get the insights back. Value attributed participation for giving incentives for collaboration, that's really important. And the last one is privacy preserving. So why we have that speeding and de-risking transactions kind of thing here is more like if we have the raw data, it's not a bunch of large amounts of data that's given. It's actually you're just sharing very simple yes or no questions, and that would actually speed up the speed of how supply chains are being run right now. And this is a very simple example of a graphite supply chain and an anode map, and assuming that they're all kind of providing for one OEM. So sometimes you have a lot of data providers. So the first one, the pink one, is, oh, this is from Digital Passport. So we heard that word a lot today. So these are verified high quality data from people from across the supply chain, but at the same time, you also have different data providers. So medium quality, third-party verified data could be documents, and that's from the blue color. And then the last but not least is we have some low confidence declared claims. So it will be attestations to, I have received this, or I have done this kind of thing. And then so we are looking to kind of gather all those different things and actually come together, and how do we find that out? So as a supplier, something that you need to do is you onboard people who are in your supply chain. So verified companies. So what do we mean by that is that OEM will have companies in their supply chain that they're connected to, and those would be securely onboarded into your system. So you're onboarding kind of layer by layer in a way. At the same time, you can still query down to the supply chain. So OEMs can still send the queries down to the various participants. And then, for example, if you would want to check if the provenance, do they have the right things that they need? Do they have certificates? And ISO 9001 and bill of lading, etc. And then afterwards, you receive the insights, and we're really talking about not the raw data. We query it from the data source that they have, and we're keeping the data there, so at least we can not expose what they have. At the same time, we get what we need. So it's a win-win for both sides. This is a demonstration from Cambridge. So it's a visualization of how the supply chain nodes would kind of work in theory. So in a sense, if you ask a question, it actually propagates to the different nodes in the supply chain. At the same time, it's when we think about queries, it sounds like, oh, it's very, very difficult to retrieve the data, but at the same time, you only get the things from what you look for, so it's all very secure. And this is very complex for what actually happens because it's all in the background. So when ideally, if you're a supplier, you just want to ask a question and you get the right answer back. So that's a quick demonstration of how it might look like. So one idea would be what graphite, or for example, electric vehicles, what types of companies are there, and so on. So there's a lot of these things that we could look to. So this is more of a visualization tool for that. So one of the few key takeaways from this is nice as a proof of concept. I think it demonstrated that a lot of these elements, we talk about identity management, insight generation, and de-risking transactions, and participation incentives is really important. So what are the next steps for that is we have part of the consortium, Chainvine, who is also in the audience today. They're going to be taking this use case to be going to build it to commercialize in a commodity trading platform. Can't see him right now. Oh, there he is. Yeah, there he goes. And then ICC from Nick Davis, he would kind of look into how do we disseminate and exploit this even further. So, and for DC, for Digital Catapult, we're taking this into Veritable. So taking all the capabilities that we've learned from this project into building a product offering. And a sneak peek of what it is, we're building a foundational infrastructure for things like digital identities. How do you actually trust who these people are? What is secure querying, asking the right questions, getting your insights back, and also exploring about credentials and how do we kind of shrink that, because that seems to be a very important thing in a lot of supply chains. So if you're interested to learn more, how do we kind of do this together? Because I think collaboration is really key, especially when we're talking about this at this stage in the digital world. So thanks, everyone.
Certainly got some good discussion going, which was good to see. We're now moving on to the next one, which is all looking about digital engineering and connected MBEE. So I'm going to invite Ben up to come and talk with us about what they've been doing and how that fits into the collaboration picture.
All right, hello everyone. So I'm Ben Hopper, I'm a Principal Research Engineer at the National Composite Centre. So we're part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. So it's similar to the Digital Catapult in some ways, but it's made up of 7 centres and there's various statistics you can read there. This slide's here mainly so my comms team don't shout at me. So I'm going to talk to you about model-based enterprise. So I thought I'd start off by explaining what it actually is, because some of you will recognise the term and some of you won't. So engineering drawings have been around for hundreds of years. Over the last 50 or so years, it's moved on to things becoming more and more model-based, to the point where maybe 20 years ago, model-based definition is where the model is master, so any drawings that are created from the model rather than the other way around. But there's now a move into what's known as model-based enterprise, so that's trying to take the model-based definition and do away with engineering drawings completely. So all of your annotations, your tables, your tolerances and everything is all embedded in the CAD model. And that model is then reused in your manufacturing processes and in your inspection processes. So you have one model that's used throughout. Why would you do that? It reduces your turnaround times. If you're not having to recreate information from a model onto a drawing sheet into another model, it's obviously going to be quicker. And by not having to do that recreation, there's less chance for making mistakes. So your part quality will improve overall. But there's a number of challenges. Interoperability has been raised as a challenge a number of times today already, and this is no different. And traceability. So we were working with some aerospace partners, and as you can probably imagine, for aerospace, traceability is key. You've got to have very good traceability throughout. So how can you share all of this information in a new way and maintain that traceability? And if you're an OEM, how do you share the information that you need to share without sharing everything? So say you were developing a new aero engine, you might not want other people to know how that engine works exactly, just the bits they need to manufacture to go into it. So what we put together was we've built a network between some of the catapult centres to replicate an aerospace supply chain and pass engineering models between the different centres as it would be done in a real supply chain. So the partners for this project were made up from HVMC with Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre Northwest and National Composite Centre. We had industrial partners from BAE Systems and Rolls-Royce. We had a vendor partner, so this is a software partner, which was Siemens Digital Industries, and a supporting partner, the National Physical Laboratory. And overall, we looked at sort of three main areas. We looked at interoperability, we looked at the CAD software, we looked at how that information would go from where it originates into other software, but we looked at the digital thread. So this is the traceability bit. How do you allow access to what you need to allow access to, but not to everything? What can you put in the digital thread? Are there any restrictions? And how do you know if the data you put in is the same as the data that came out? Has something degraded? And in parallel to all that, we looked at digital capability assessments. So Rolls-Royce have developed their own process of going through and assessing their supply chain to see where they are in relation to different areas of digital capability. But there's also the Smart Industries Readiness Index. So in terms of the interoperability, we picked 3 pieces of CAD software based on the software used by the actual supply chain. So BAE and Rolls-Royce went off and surveyed a number of their suppliers, and they came back with, here's a list of the top 10, I think it was, different softwares in different areas. So we took the top 3 in CAD, and similar for computer-aided manufacturing and the interoperability. And we looked at creating the information. So when I talk about creating information that used to be on drawings, we identified hundreds of different features. We actually did it on about 50 different ones, ranging from tolerances, feature control frames. So this is how you actually control where different features are on your part. Even the 3D geometry, the shape of the part itself, it's all things that needed to be considered. And we looked at how you could pass those between the different pieces of CAD software. So sometimes someone like BAE would work with a design company to do some of the engineering design. They wouldn't do it all themselves. So you had to consider the CAD to CAD interface, but then it would obviously have to go into manufacturing and into inspection. So we looked at all of those. Now there's already some file types around that should be able to accomplish a lot of this. So there's 2 different types defined by ISO standards that should accommodate all of this information, but in all honesty don't, or at least the way people apply them, it doesn't work. So we looked at all of those different formats, and there's a relatively small graph at the bottom showing that although most people's anecdotal evidence is none of it works, some of it does. Not a lot, but some of it does. The second area we looked at was around digital thread. So this is the network we built between National Composite Centre and AMRC Northwest. So you've got in the middle there, you've got Prime 1 and Prime 2. So that's your OEMs, essentially, or your OEM and the risk-sharing partner, for example. They use whatever software they happen to use. And one of the nice things about this particular project was Rolls-Royce and BAE, whereas historically OEMs would have said, we use software X, therefore, if you want to work with us, you must go and buy software X. That's not how they want to work in the future. They want to work with suppliers regardless of what software they've got. So it keeps the costs down for the suppliers. It makes it a lot easier for them, because if they worked with 2 companies, they'd have to go and buy 2 software suites. If they work with 3, they're buying 3, and so on. So it is much easier for them if they can just buy 1 piece of software and do everything they need. So we've got the 2 primes in the middle. On the left-hand side, we passed information through from NCC to AMRC, and in this particular case, we were doing it via SharePoint. So engineering has used a type of software called product lifecycle management for quite a long time, which gives very good traceability within an organisation. So what we were doing was, well, we know there's ways of passing the information. SharePoint is one of them. It's relatively common. What control can you actually achieve with SharePoint? The other end of the scale is what we've referred to as direct access. So in this particular case, it was Prime 1 directly logging into Prime 2's PLM system. That's great. That achieved everything that we wanted in terms of any of this work. But it means that if you've got tens, hundreds, thousands of suppliers, you need to let them all into your system. Maybe that's realistic. I suspect a lot of companies would hesitate. But we also looked at, there's a couple of methods which are sort of halfway between the 2. So you can export from the PLM system in in a compressed file that takes all the metadata with it. So it maintains things like part numbers, versions, material data. So we exported it as those, and it was better than doing it on SharePoint, where you lost a lot of that embedded information, but doing it via the direct access where you kept everything. It was somewhere in between. And similarly, there was a supplier portal. So essentially, you published it to a website for your suppliers to log into and access. And that achieved most of the traceability you got from the direct access without letting all those suppliers into your system. On the capability assessment side, I'm not going to talk about the Rolls-Royce digital minimum standards. There's a link there. I can provide that, or you can get it off the slides later if you get hold of them. There's a website where you can request access. What I'm going to talk about a little bit more is the Smart Industry Readiness Index. So this is something that's supported by the World Economic Forum and has a method of going through, and it's much easier to look up than try and read all of those. But the important layer is the bottom one, where there's 16 different areas, and there's a scoring system against each of those, where essentially you've got different levels and it identifies different areas to focus on for a business. Some of the stuff that's followed on from this, so we actually finished our project back in the summer. So since then, there's been a bid submitted to the Regulatory Sciences Innovation Fund around model-based enterprise regulation. We're just waiting to hear the outcome of the bid for the second phase of that. There's also the Smart Design Network, which is building on that network we started off between the two centres, and is there, or the intention is for companies to come along and say, we've got this problem, and we'll recreate the situation they've got and look for solutions. And finally, we've also got some working groups now established around model-based enterprise, one within HVMC itself, but also we've got a wider industrial user group. So within that, we've got people like catapults, industrial users, software suppliers, and academia. So it's a forum for people to come and talk about model-based enterprise, what the common problems are, and what we want to try and get from any standards in the future. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, really interesting, and hopefully a slightly different dimension on what we've been talking about today. So I'm now going to hand over to, I think, Amar, who's going to talk about the Logistics Living Lab. Thanks, Amar.
Thank you, Tim. All right. Okay, so as Tim said, I'm going to be talking about Logistics Living Lab. So just for context, this was the first flagship that launched within the Hub program, and it successfully completed last week on Monday, so end of September. So it's been a fun 2 years, and I've been very fortunate to lead the project throughout. I will just caveat this really quickly by saying that there is a lot of content that came out of this project, and we covered a lot of topics, a lot of different pieces of good work that all sort of come together. I'm going to focus mainly on the key points, but I really encourage people to come have a chat with me afterwards if you want to know more, if anything is particularly intriguing to you. So, busy slide, but don't worry. The key objective of the project is that top corner, which was basically how can we demonstrably improve efficiency, vehicle utilization, and reduce CO2 emissions within logistics, and specifically through collaboration using advanced digital technology. Kingsley mentioned before that theme of collaboration. You'll see it plays throughout this entire presentation. So we know, so a bit of a scene setting or context setting. So we know businesses want to be more productive, they want to be more efficient, and they want to reduce their CO2 footprint. And that's necessary for us to reach, well, net zero by 2050. And you can imagine how difficult that might be, particularly in logistics, where the core service generates CO2 itself. So vehicles are going up and down the country, delivering goods, delivering orders, and they will generate a lot of CO2. Now, the challenge within this specifically that we targeted, and I'll come on to this very shortly, but 30% of the vehicle, the vehicle miles that are generated by heavy goods vehicles in the UK, that total number, which is several billion miles, 30% of that is vehicles running empty. So that is wasted capacity within the network. And that number has remained pretty consistent over the years. So it's a big challenge. And the fact that it's consistent tells us that, you know, there's only so much that individual businesses can do to address that problem. If they could do more, you'd probably see at least a lowering of that number over time. But it seems like, yeah, there's only so much an individual organization can do, in this case, a logistics carrier, to, yeah, optimize as best they can within their sphere of influence. So the project, responding to this challenge, the project identified an opportunity to basically enable collaboration amongst the logistics network, I'll put it that way, to address these challenges head on. So Digital Catapult has built a data sharing infrastructure that we call Sequence that enables collaboration to happen and effectively for you to coordinate logistics resources better. And the way we've done that is we did a discovery phase in which we kind of quantified this problem. And again, I've talked about it at a very high level. We developed this solution, and then we wanted to meaningfully test it in a real-world environment using real-world data. And so that's what we did in the form of a case study that I'll speak about very shortly. Just before I change slides, I just want to give a quick shout out to some of the consortium members, to everyone who basically helped us complete this project. So Nick from Incept was very helpful in helping us kind of surface this data, do a lot of the analysis. We have Will and Advaith from Fuse who developed the algorithm, and I'll explain what the algorithm is very shortly. Phil Rowe from Logistics UK, very helpful domain knowledge, helped us steer in the right direction throughout the project. And then we've got Raquel at the back here from Pairpoint, where we did a lot of exploratory work around dynamic data and IoT. And again, I'll speak about that a bit later. Okay, so we have our challenge. We have trucks running up and down the country that are 30% of those miles that accumulated, they're empty. So in a nutshell, the question was, can we use that capacity, that wasted capacity within those trucks to fulfill orders? And so here I describe them as collaborative partners, but it's basically referring to a collection of suppliers, manufacturers, companies that are producing goods and need to ship them somewhere. And then on the bottom is capacity availability. So that, in effect, represents our currently wasted capacity, that 30%. What we did was build this infrastructure, and the purpose of that infrastructure is to enable data sharing. So if you think about the problem in a tangible sense, that data, well, before I even go into the data, so from the perspective of suppliers, the data that represents those supplier orders and the data that represents that capacity is not visible. The trouble is, at the moment, if within your sphere of influence you can see everything, but if you're talking about across a supply chain and many different companies, it's very difficult to get that visibility. So how can we sort of uncover that? How can we aggregate that so that we can do something useful with it? So this is the role of the shared digital infrastructure. Essentially, it is you could think about it as a giant networked hard drive, but it effectively allows your collaborative partners, the people who could in theory work together, to share the relevant pieces of information into an anonymized, secure, seamless data sharing capability. And one of the key points around this is the data that we're talking about here is, in the case of a supplier order, that order, it will be, you're only talking about the necessary parameters that describe that order needed for collaboration. So an order might be, okay, what is the weight of it? How big is it? Where does it need to go? Where does it need to arrive by? So just completely anonymized information that gives you a useful characterization of it. On the flip side, you'll have capacity information, which basically describes where is the vehicle, where it's able to pick up goods because it's not full or it's completely empty, where is it heading to, and how much capacity does it have. So what we're trying to do is create a bridge between those two things. And so, well, first of all, if you have data that represents those aggregate orders and capacities, and you feed them into an infrastructure that allows you to share that in an anonymized, seamless way, you then can attach useful applications, and we describe them here as enabling applications. So the thing that we did within the project, and specifically Fuse developed, what Fuse developed was a matchmaking algorithm. So if you think of that yellow blob as now an anonymized pooled information, pooled data of effectively that visibility that you wouldn't have otherwise. And again, one of the key features of the infrastructure is each participant that submits data, they control it, that they have data sovereignty over the thing that they control. As effectively, think of it as like a giant set of lockers, only you have the key to your door. And so all you're doing is sharing that key to, in this case, a third-party application that can do something useful with it. So Fuse developed an algorithm in the form of that algorithmic order and capacity matching. And again, there's other capability built into there. But effectively, they're looking at that data that has been submitted to that infrastructure and effectively matching parameters and saying that this order with this capacity makes a compliant match, because in theory, this truck can go, it needs to be back at its distribution center by 10 o'clock. It can deliver this job by 9 o'clock and head back. And so what you're doing is utilizing that, what would have been otherwise wasted capacity, and turning it into something useful. And the value that gets generated from that is naturally less empty running. You're taking capacity that wasn't used before and filling it. That naturally leads to reduced CO2 emissions because you're delivering the same number of goods with less capacity. And then cost savings and cost analysis and savings. But the cost savings come in the form of the forward journey for that vehicle that would have been running empty is already a sunk cost. The logistics carrier has already paid for that. So anything they can do to make more money off that in some form is a benefit to them. And in theory, they should be able to offer a cheaper price to suppliers who otherwise would have had to find another carrier and pay a higher price. So in the context of the case study that we did, again, the concept that I'm talking about can generalize beyond the thing that the context that we chose. But again, this was more about, we had access to real world data, historic data that we could do experimentation on and prove the basis. So in this context, we have a retailer-owned distribution center. So the retailer that we're talking about in this context is Blakemore. Most of you in the room will know them as Spar UK. So Spar UK runs on a franchise model, and Blakemore operate over 250 of those retail Spar stores that you see across the UK that sell, food. They also service several independents. They also run their own logistics division. So in this case, our retailer and our logistics division are the same persona. So in this case, you have a truck that's full of inventory, going to retail stores, servicing them, and by the end of the journey, it's empty, so it returns back to the distribution center empty. That's what happens right now. On the flip side, you have suppliers who are providing those goods that eventually end up in those retail stores, and the cost of that logistics operation, because that's a cost that's eaten by the supplier, the cost of that will be proportional to the size of the organization. So naturally, a big supplier like a P&G, they will have economies of scale. Whereas on the flip side, smaller suppliers, less volume, bigger cost for logistics as a whole. And what we're saying is, what if you could match the blue journeys with the red journeys and utilize that wasted capacity with the orders that were going to go to the same distribution center anyway? What it looks like in reality. So this isn't far from the truth, but if you look at the geographical spread, you can see hotspots immediately. Like this is, again, it's a pretty, it's not 100% true, but it's pretty close. Like really you need to add another 200 stores on there, but you would see the overlap, and you can see how big that opportunity could be, because you naturally have geographical hotspots where the trucks, the journeys, those red journeys and blue journeys overlap significantly. So I just want to end on this quick results and impact. So those numbers along the right side, is it right side? Yeah, right side, sorry. The numbers along the right side are just figures that have come from the DFT reports on road freight statistics. So again, reiterating that point of basically 30% of journeys run empty. And that accounts for 5.7 billion kilometers per year, and that's in the UK. Again, retailer empty vehicle running, roughly around 30%. 3PL, Wincanton, their empty running is also around 30%. And on top of that, everything that I've mentioned has referred specifically to empty vehicles. Most full vehicles or partially full vehicles are operating at 60% full, so there's capacity within that as well. But the key result from the pilot, again, this was a narrowed, this was like a subsection of the total possible impact within the Blakemore context. You extrapolate this beyond, outside of that retailer, across logistics as a whole, the opportunity is massive. But yeah, I just want to draw your attention to, in our context, so just within our pilot context, there's a potential saving of 900,000 kilometers that, per annum, a reduction there. And then across that logistics network specifically, even at just 20% adoption, collaborators, 20% of those companies are collaborating, that is nearly 800, or just over 800 ton reduction in CO2. And that number was worked out using there is a DEFRA standard methodology for fuel burnt for heavy goods vehicles, and that's just basically an extrapolation of that. The last bit is the kind of bottom right corner, which again, we talked about before around incentives or basically getting businesses to, it's more than, the point of this project was to be more than a technology demonstrator and show that it can work in the real world. We managed to sort of do analysis and work out what the price per case is. So logistics typically works in pallets, so trucks moving around, they will hold up to 26 pallets. And those pallets will have boxes within them stacked up into a giant cube. That's a cost per those cases. So you can see the potential benefit that's there from this collaboration, because that reduction in logistics costs.
Great, so thanks, Amar, that was really good. I hope everyone can see that there's somewhat of a thread between those things that was nicely set up by Kingsley around the collaboration. We'll move into that thread also after the break, where we're going to talk about partnerships and the power of partnerships as well.
So we've now got a sort of session to build on what we've been talking about in the last session around the collaboration technical solutions. Yeah, we're now going to talk about the power of partnerships across supply chains. So I'm going to hand over to Ola, who's going to introduce us to the session and to the panel, and hopefully have a really interesting discussion. So also hopefully time for a few questions from the floor as well, or yeah, when we go through. So
that's the goal.
Yeah, jolly good. Okay, great. Thanks, Ola.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, and welcome back from the break, everyone. This next session is a panel discussion with 3 industry members of our Supply Chain Hub team. My name is Ola Lela. I'm an innovation partner here at Digital Catapult. Thank you. And I will be a moderator for today's session. So I'm joined here by Obie Adaimbraba, a data science research fellow at Northumbria University, by Mark Enzer, strategic advisor for Mott MacDonald, and Sally Deaton, founder of Laundry. So today we've been exploring a lot about how the different partners have been collaborating together, and today's session is very much around exploring the power of strategic partnerships within digital supply chains. I think we've all kind of encountered this topic or this one phrase in one way or another, which is innovation does not happen in a vacuum. And I think today's presentations and projects that have been presented very much represent that and are very a testament to that by all means. So I think it's time to now dive deeper into what are the requirements for successful collaboration and some further examples from our panelists here. And we'll touch upon about what's next in the industry and how we can strategically plan for further partnerships in the future. And as Tim mentioned, there's going to be time for questions at the end. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to our panelists to give introductions about who they are, what they've done in the hub as well, and then we'll go into some questions to each of you.
Thank you, Ola, for the introduction. My name is Obi Adaibrama. As she mentioned before, I'm a research fellow from Northumbria University, and I currently work with Digital Catapult and Digital Supply Chain Hub on a spares testbed program. So I do a lot of the research and the development within that scope, essentially.
Hi, I'm Mark Enzer. I'm a strategic advisor at Macdonald. I'm also a visiting professor at Cambridge and Imperial. Turn it on, turn it around.
Good idea. So I probably shouldn't have said I'm a visiting professor at Cambridge and Imperial, because it doesn't look like I'm a very good one, does it? I was also previously the head of the UK's National Digital Twin Programme, so I'm very much into this whole idea of data sharing infrastructure.
Hi, I'm Sally Dayton, founder of Laundry. We are one of the new generation, well, the first of our kind, an urban factory coming back into London, where we do small circular bespoke production to help brands and retailers, new small businesses and recyclers, hopefully, reprocess or refinish through laundry technology jeans. Basically, we do jeans. Digital's a whole new world to me, in a way. I come from a very collaborative industry, and it's been very exciting to sort of open my eyes with all these opportunities. So, yeah, that's what Laundry's all about.
Thank you all. So I think we'll start off the discussion looking at the bigger picture of partnerships and collaborations. Mark, I'll start off with you. Given the complexity of supply chains, and we've all kind of seen elements of that throughout today, what approach should industry take for collaborations and partnerships going forward?
It's a lovely question. So I think that the approach we should take is one which is outcomes focused, systems based, and community enabled. And so really the kind of the angle I'm wanting to add into this is the systems angle and seeing how things are connected. In my view, we need to have both a bottom-up approach to this thing we're talking about, as well as a top-down approach, and not see them as enemies of each other. We need both. And so we need to kind of experiment down with the bottom-up approach to try things out, see what works, just do it and learn by doing. But we also need the overview, see how things connect together and be intentional about it and have strategy. And hopefully those things will meet in the middle. And so I think that this joined up strategic systems-based approach is absolutely essential. And for me, the starting point of that is to articulate shared outcomes. If we know where we're trying to get to, what the goal is, where we're trying to go, the destination, which almost always is going to be articulated in some kind of combination of environmental, social, and economic outcomes. They're the things that actually matter. Then that, I think, gives us kind of the light on the hill that we move towards. It's like, it's the point, it's the purpose. And if we share that outcome, then it enables collaboration. If we're all pulling in slightly different directions, we pull each other apart. So for me, that is the starting point. It has to be systems based, but let's kind of have some shared outcomes, because then we pull together.
Great, thank you. I'd like to open up the question to Sally Obier as well. What else is required for successful partnerships to take place?
So for successful partnerships, just like Mark had said, shared outcomes, shared goals, and we also need to be flexible for change. I feel like in as much as we talk about digital transformations in this space and outside of this space, many businesses are not ready for that. They're not ready in terms of maybe the key stakeholders in some businesses are like, oh, we've been doing this for 25 years, we're fine. We don't need new technology. We don't need to spend money. We're fine the way we are. Or in some cases, it's just a lack of data literacy. Some organizations don't know the data that they have and how they could use it to adopt into the digital transformations and the digital technologies. So if we could build, essentially for collaboration, build trust, have a shared goal, and then be open to change, I feel like it would support collaboration as a whole.
And Sally?
Yeah, I agree. That's the word, trust. That's what it all comes down to. I think as a denim industry, I've worked in for a long time, we've always worked collaboratively. You can't make a pair of jeans without knowing the fabric, working with the mill, working with the chemical companies who have a lot of compliance challenges, and working with the manufacturer to understand the product. So we've always worked together, and I think we're one of the most collaborative. But now all of a sudden the digital world's upon us and we have to comply. We need clear legislation to enable us to do that. There's, like, in this room, there's so many solutions. It's like a candy store for me. There's so many of you working on brilliant projects, but what are the right ones to be able to have a transparent manufacturing business in the UK, which is what we want to be, and the future has to be transparent. So trust and legislation are the two things we need to really make this happen.
Mark, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I very much agree with what's been said. I mean, I think that trust in some ways needs to be formalized, so that the extra word I'd chuck in would be governance. And I think that if we're taking this kind of big picture view, then we do need to apply some kind of governance, particularly to the kind of the data sharing infrastructure. It feels to me like one of those important components of it. It's definitely not just technical, as we know, this is socio-technical. And to my mind, because you're so right about the trust, we also need to build in governance that actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to go into more detail, let's zoom into one of the industries that we're focused here on the hub. You know, today we've heard a lot about the test beds and the SMEs that have been involved in challenges around circular textiles. So to no surprise, Salia, I'll point this question at you. How are strategic partnerships transforming traditional supply chain models, for example, in textiles?
Yeah, it's happening a lot. I mean, I was in the cohort with Reverse Resources, who are doing a fantastic job connecting waste materials and leftover scraps from the factories with the mills to enable them to incorporate recycled fibre into the product. So that's one area, and they work with Dr. John Parkinson, brilliant, fantastic guy. So we got to see that, and we got to test it out as well from a garment perspective. Can we identify waste garments? Can we connect? So that's just one thing we did for circularity. And we know the work that's going on with Circulate. I won't even begin to explain it because Mark Lorenzo can do that far better than I. But our industry, the textile industry, is very archaic. And again, it comes back to trust, visibility, and that's a big problem in the industry. People are trying to adopt, but it's very slow. And I think some of that is lack of knowledge. I think, like myself, we're very terrified of the digital world if we don't have the skill set some of you have. So it's how we show brands, retailers, businesses, textile people that this can be managed. It can be easy, straightforward. It needs simplifying, so it's really easy to adopt into your business. And again, goes back to the governance legislation. But yeah, and that's where funding comes in as well. We talked about the grants. The grant that we got from this, the small grant, was fantastic, gave us an opportunity to run a pilot. We ran it in Spain because there's nowhere of doing it here. And it gave us that opportunity to show what can be done in terms of product. It would be fantastic to start piloting some of the opportunities we see, especially on the digital product passport on the side. This whole experience connected me with Paola and Rika and the guys from Maybuy, and we're working on a project on the side, unfunded for ourselves, which is great. So I'm learning a lot about the digital product passport space. So these collaborations are really, really important, and connections. Even the logistics project we just heard about was fantastic. So there's so many opportunities in this room, but we need more funding. And I'm not the only business that's going to sit here and say it, for us to take these solutions and make them viable and have longevity in the industry.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, you know, textiles has its own opportunities and challenges. And I think it's fair to say that that's the same across all supply chain industries. We've spoken about the challenges, but I also want to touch upon the positives of working in supply chains. So a question to all of you is, what's unique about collaboration in supply chains compared to other industries? And how can you leverage that? So, Obie, I'll go with you first.
So for supply chains, we all know that supply chains span across several organizations, several geographies, several regulatory environments. So we could leverage these interconnected systems or this interconnectivity to come together, collaborate, to solve, like to do collaborative problem solving and align goals so that we could build more efficient and resilient supply chains. That's the simplest I can.
I think that's a really great one-liner, Mark.
Yeah, I think the area that I mainly work in is the built environment. So that basically means everything that's been built, everything that's been modified by humans, which then covers all of infrastructure, you know, energy, transport, water, that kind of stuff, but also the buildings which are connected up by that. So effectively, it's everything that we can see out there, and all the other systems are hosted within it. So whether you're looking at education system or manufacturing system or any of those others, are effectively hosted in this built environment. So supply chains are absolutely integral to making the built environment work. And it's not just building the new stuff, which is, I guess, where our minds automatically go to if we think built environment. It's like we think construction. But most of the built environment is already built. Look, it's out there. And in this country, we've got 99.5% of the built environment we need already. And each year we add 0.5% to it. So the supply chains that we're talking about are not just about construction. It's also about keeping the stuff going and maintaining it and keeping things in life. And so I think one of the key things which I would add to this kind of argument is looking about the systems that we already have and getting more out of what we've got, and the role of supply chains in that. And with that perspective, then suddenly our objective function is a bit different. And definitely we need to be improving the information flow across organizational and sector boundaries. And to my mind, this is like the unifying thing that we're talking about. Whether you're talking about genes or whether you're talking about the whole of the built environment, the thing that connects it all up is that we need these siloed organizations that currently sit in it and kind of run it. They need to have a secure, resilient information flow across organizational sector boundaries. That's the thing we've got to solve. And I thought it was absolutely fascinating listening to earlier on. We've got a number of different solutions which are working in that space. They're all part of the same solution. So let's see how we can join them up. I think that feels like a mega challenge to us, but one which is worth embracing.
Yeah. Definitely. And as a small new business in this space, it's our biggest fear. What you're saying is we're going to be working with brands and retailers that have adopted their own digital systems, especially in the digital passport space. So we will have to intake their data from many different models and different companies. Then we add on our own data. We want a platform ourselves where we can share out transparency, the products we use, the time of the process, the energy, the carbon footprint, and all those things we can capture, and then pass that information back onto the brand that then can pass it on to the customer. So we have to in-house information from a retailer, a mill, many, many different things. And it could, if there's costs associated with that, it'll crucify us in our first year. So we're trying to find a way of, like you say, the communication throughout the whole supply chain is crucial. If there's one platform that everybody can access and it's straightforward, it would make it a lot easier. But at the moment there isn't. So yeah, communication and trust through this again.
Yeah, definitely some themes coming through throughout the day and this discussion. You've all spoken about your involvement in the hub, and I don't think it will be to anyone's surprise that I'm going to ask this question, which is what opportunities have been created through your participation as part of the program?
First, just the basic one, which is an opportunity to national networking through events just like this, and also through the virtual hub that was launched in July. So we've gotten opportunities from the academic point, from the development point. We've gotten opportunities to come talk to people that are relevant to the work that we're doing to our field, and see and share ideas, innovative ideas, and talk about the current challenges. So I feel like Digital Supply Chain Hub has provided us with such opportunities.
Thanks. Yes. Sally or Mark?
Same for me. I've met so many companies and say there's so many opportunities. Kid in a candy store. Which ones do we choose? Which ones can we work with? How can we adopt them into our model? I'd say doing the digital passport project with Made By has been brilliant. The guys are so amazing. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of understanding that I've gained from that as well. That wasn't even in my cohort. So it's been really good. And again, reverse resources, what they're doing will change our industry dramatically. So it's great to be connected with those people.
Yeah, for me, it's a similar thing. It is about the connections. And for me, it's been really valuable to see other people grappling with the same issues in other areas. I've already described how I see it in the built environment. It's remarkable to me to see that it is exactly the same thing, pretty much wherever you look. And so I think it's actually valuable to us collectively to kind of share a big picture, because if it's true that it is the same picture, then we might as well articulate it that way, because then it becomes easier to solve. And so for me, that's been hugely valuable. It's about getting this really coherent big picture. And if I can just say part of what I think that big picture is, it's seeing that we've got all these connections in the physical world, which we're very familiar with because we've been dealing with them for thousands of years. And now suddenly we've got digital worlds. And so we've got to deal with new connections which are not so familiar. It's the connection between digital and physical, but then also between digital and digital. And that's what I think we're grappling with. And we're getting closer and we're getting closer. And some of the solutions we've heard this afternoon are getting so close to what would really work across sectors. So I think we're doing a great thing here. I would just love us, like those lava lamps, for the blobs to come together, because it feels tantalizingly close to a solution that really works.
I really love that metaphor. I might steal it later on. But, we've explored partnerships to date. We've heard around projects that have been developed over the past few years or months. But OBA, maybe a question for you, given your work at your university, and if you could share some insights on what are some emerging trends in digital supply chains that are likely to shape the future of partnerships.
So I'll talk about emerging trends within Industry 5.0, because that's what relates most to what the work we're doing within the university. So Industry 5.0 emphasizes on human-robot collaboration, essentially. So this would give a new world to supply chains where automation can meet human intelligence right at the middle, and they could work together to create agile supply chains and resilient networks. So it could also shift the views or the minds of the partners, where they don't just think about, oh, we're going to put this new technology in our business, we're going to change this, apply AI. It lets them think of human-centered designs, because of course, many people are worried, oh, I'm going to lose my job. AI is coming to replace me. Robots are coming to replace us. So essentially, if they could look at more human-centered designs in form of technology, put them together, and then they could also, it could lead to opportunities for them to upskill their workforce or to reskill their workforce. Another emerging trend could also be the growth of hyperconnectivity through IoT. Everyone's using IoT to track and all of that, AIs and distributed ledger technology such as blockchains. When they're all integrated, they lead to hyperconnectivity. So it could change the approach of interaction between partners. Instead of the linear top-down approach that everyone's used to, it could open a world to a decentralized and a collaborative ecosystem for collaboration. And then they could sync goals, they could look at problems together and solve them dynamically and in real time.
And that's really interesting, and that's definitely given me some food for thought. And I'd love to hear from Mark and Sally, from you as well. With programs such as the Digital Supply Chain Hub, what kind of skills should there be a focus on for partnerships to be successful and in future iterations of programs?
Yeah, I think a lot of training needs to happen. One thing that Laundry will be when we're live in the new year is an education centre as well. So we are in a position where a lot of supply chain partners in our industry are overseas. They want a facility in the UK to come in to collaborate with us and other people. Our buyers and our customers don't have the budgets to travel. So we're trying to facilitate an experience in the UK so they can experience the manufacturing, how we digitally do our processes with machines, but also it's about educating better ways of working. We'll be collaborating and hopefully part of an academy in the UK, and providing courses to train businesses and train people how we can make clothes better, the processes we use, how we make it more efficient, and that will link the whole supply chain. That will be using those partners. So we'll bring people together in one space and educate. And on the hub, that kind of education hopefully can be shared as well.
That's a great segue into our next session. Thank you. But we're not done here yet. Mark, how about you? Skills of the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's very tempting to kind of go with the technical skills, because in this space that we're talking about of the kind of connection between digital and physical, there's a lot of really fun stuff. we haven't mentioned digital twins very much, but there's a whole thing of robotics and digital twins and AI, and you mentioned IoT and all these really fun things that kind of need technical people to help stitch them together. Because I agree with you, it's about integration rather than individual technologies. But I wouldn't actually point my my skills thing at that technical side. I have a feeling that will happen. The bit that to me maybe needs the real encouragement is much more on the kind of the social human side, because as I said earlier, I think this is really a socio-technical issue, and this kind of collaboration that we're talking about, the kind of the partnerships that is kind of the heading, they rely on kind of a radical approach to collaboration that we kind of haven't had before, and where we've been very much encouraged into the kind of position of competition always delivers value. And now what we're talking about is collaboration delivering value. It's a different space. And we've got to work out how we get collaboration and competition to work together. And I think that means quite a different mindset. And so this kind of data sharing infrastructure that we're talking about, which is essential to the solutions we're looking at, they won't work in a command and control structure. The centralized solution won't work. We need a distributed, federated solution where people are collaborating. And so the kind of words that we need instead of command and control are convene, connect, collaborate, coordinate. And that means a different mindset, and it means different skills, different leadership skills. So if I were able to put in one thing, like just one thing that we would do differently, it would be in that space. It's like, please, can we have leadership across these organizational boundaries, which is about convening, connecting, coordinating, because that way we will unlock value.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share around skills of the future?
I think Sally already said everything that I wanted to say. Essentially, businesses need to be educated on what these digital technologies are and the opportunities that it will bring to them. And through that, the businesses can then educate their teams to be able to identify relevant data to support this digital transformation, to be able to analyze such data and then interpret that for decision making.
Amazing, thank you. And I think that's great insights for us as well. So really appreciate all those thoughts. I see that we're nearing the end of our discussion so that we have time for Q&A. But one last question to pose to all of you is that you all bring different industry perspective into the work here within the Digital Supply Chain Hub. So maybe what is one key learning you'd like to share with fellow SMEs, with fellow industry members and academics, and others who are interested in working as part of these partnerships, these hubs and collaborations?
From an academic perspective, I think successful partnerships have to bridge theory and practice. So academics, we can't just go out doing whatever because we have a great idea on our desks and just work with that. We have to communicate, talk to industry partners, talk to SMEs, look at current challenges and see how we can address them and therefore open up opportunities for development and innovation. And again, all of this can be done through building trust, through effective communication and transparent communication, and also having a strong data governance framework, essentially, and again, flexibility for change.
Wonderful, thank you.
For me, it would be the thing about systems thinking, that this obviously is all about connections. That's what supply chains are. It's all about connections, and that's what systems thinking is. And so I think that in this amazing complex system that we're looking at, which effectively can't be controlled because you can't control complex systems. What you can do is understand them better and intervene more effectively. And I think that becomes what we have to do. But you can't do that unless you recognize the connections and you work with the connections. So that, to my mind, that is like the big light bulb thing for me.
No, for me, it's great as a manufacturer to have a platform like this where we can pull in lots of different businesses to be part of what we're doing, collaborate, learn, because like all the way down the line, like AI, like you say, is going to be massive in what we do to be effective in production. All of those things need to come in. So some of the partnerships we've made or some of the opportunities we see will be vital for our business moving forward. And again, building the education part. As I say, we're a country where we're talking about this amazing technology, yet not a single university is training a laser designer, which is a basic skill for denim production. We don't teach it. So we've got a big knowledge gap that we need to bridge, and we need to bring in a new approach, not approach the textile industry in the way it's always been done. We need to approach it in a very digital and new way. Yeah.
Thank you so much, OBA, Mark, and Sally. Thank you so much for your insights. You know, I think that's been a really great session with lots of thoughts that we can all take forward in our work ahead. I'd like to open up the floor for any questions. We've got a bit of time left for a few before our next segment.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Musasa. I run a small company in Birmingham where we work in new product development. Now, in terms of collaboration, policy or maybe regulation, do you, where, if you want to put it in that way, where you put the, what we say, confidentiality policy, how this is managed among the collaboration member, please?
Is this a question for specific?
So how is confidentiality managed amongst this collaboration?
Who would like to take that question?
That's a topic we were just talking about outside, wasn't it, Rika? So yeah, that's a really good question and very important. As I say, at the moment, we're working on a digital product passport for a project I've been working on with a fantastic disability ambassador. And we've been working with a factory in Pakistan who are fantastic, extremely green, extremely ethical. They've shared everything, but there's a brand new fiber we've put in this product that's a little bit game changing, and we're the first to market with it, and it improves health, and it's a medically certified fiber. And they, although I know what it is, they don't want to put this in the digital product passport, because when we show these jeans, hopefully we're having a conversation with American Eagle in a couple of weeks about this project. If they scan our QR code and we give that full visibility, then anybody who sees these jeans can see that fiber's there. And that's unique to that mill, and we want to respect that too. So there are so many challenges around how we code that data, or what do we do so we can be fully transparent, but not give away IP, not give away confidential information. So yeah, that's one of my big questions too. How do we actually transform our industry? Be transparent, but not give away the things that, you know, we need. So.
Any other thoughts, Mark, Obiang?
I think that's a really great answer, because that's a really good example of something that kind of really matters that you don't want to give away. I guess I would go to a more generic answer to the question, which is kind of saying that we need to build this into whichever architectures we move forwards with. And so going for some kind of centralized architecture where you get everyone to put all of their data into one big lake in the middle doesn't sound like a good idea, because then you give everything away. However, if you've got a distributed architecture where you're effectively giving controlled access to controlled data, but you're sharing data models and ontologies so that it makes sense when you get there, means you can understand what you're looking at, then that feels at a generic level like a much better way to go. So the kind of like the key point I would want to make is that architectures matter. And so we should think that through, and that won't necessarily come from the bottom up, which is why I say we need both bottom up and top down to work together.
Great. Thank you so much. I saw another question just behind you.
Thanks very much. Len Pannett again. Mark, your opening statement echoed John Nash fantastically well, that if we all work collaboratively, everybody gets to win rather than each of us trying to work against each other. A lot of what you've said in the discussion echoes something that Phil said earlier this afternoon about culture And we haven't got a shortage of technology. We know the basic needs for skills development and what have you, and yet we're still stuck in the miasma in the UK of being very reticent to try doing new things. So bringing this to material, I suppose, a material point, what are the 1 or 2 things that each of us can go away today and do in our own organizations and those we work with to improve the opportunities for partnerships and from their productivity improvement?
Shall I go with that?
Go for it.
Okay, so it's going to be generic again because I prefer generic. I think one of the things which we can all do is understand the system within which we work. And that itself will start the ball rolling, because whenever you choose a kind of a boundary that is manageable, the bit that you can see, and there's the bit that you are, and those that you relate to, those connections I talked about before, you got the nodes and the links, then you can see that in that nice kind of the boundary of your system of interest, it will always be affected by somebody outside that system. But that's a useful thing to draw. And so what I would suggest as a starting point, the thing that all of us could go back and do is just going to draw the system that we sit within and understand what is controlling what is incentivizing what, and then trying to understand how a little bit of collaboration would work with other people in that system that would then end up benefiting all of us. But it's only when you start to understand the constraints and the incentives that you can begin to do that. If we work in the dark, each thinking that we are in our isolated pod that has no effect with anything else, then we can never get there. So a simple answer is just start by mapping out a bit of the system and understanding constraints and incentives.
Great, thank you. I see one more question here at the front.
Just to build on that, actually, just from my experience, I would add also simplification and making those complex systems that you were talking about simplified for the people at the bottom of the organization who are actually doing the work. I think making that kind of mystic story demystified and helping them to kind of take the steps that towards that ideal system that you described would be quite helpful. Thank you.
Just a really quick one on that. I think you're exactly right. And very often what we tend to do is make things complicated. But there's this big difference, isn't there, between complicated and complex? It's like the real world is complex. We can't help that. We need to deal with the world as it is. But so often what we tend to do is make it complicated. And that's unnecessary. So I think what we should be doing in the simplification that you rightly talk about is where things have been unnecessarily complicated, let's make them simple. Where they're complex, let's recognize the complexity and work with that. Because, Einstein, who seemed to be a pretty clever bloke, I mean, one of the things he said was make things as simple as possible, but not simpler. Because if you make things simpler than they really are, then you're not dealing with the real world anymore.
Thank you. Any final questions? One more here.
Thank you. So I want to ask a question for you guys to potentially give some very concrete example from your practice. In a sense that we talk about partnership, we want to encourage it, a lot of trust needed, but can you share some example from your work that there's a partnership being requested to you, like we want to build partner with you on this particular thing? And maybe there's an example of a bad request in the sense of you asked this, but I really can't trust you. And what are the elements that you really can't trust? AKA we can learn from not doing that or do better than that. Or like from Landre's example, you keep talking on made by. For example, what do they show you that earned your trust to build a partnership? So maybe we can also learn from good cases and bad cases. So whatever example you can give.
So many things. We'll be here all day. So
We've got a minute.
yeah. Not in a digital world, but an example of a really good partnership. So tomorrow I'm flying to Italy. So we've been supported by the closest model to what laundry is. There's only a couple in the world. And they have been guiding us over the last year on our journey and working with us. We share the technology, we're sharing learnings from them, and they will be part of our community. There's also one in Germany. And when we're all operational, we all want to be a local solution within our country. So if say one of our retailers is holding stock in Germany, we'll share that with the German arm and make sure that we're all operating with the lowest carbon footprint. And that's something we all generally believe together. We've known each other a while and we're supporting. So that's for me a really great partnership. We're sharing learnings and we're working together. With Made By, I've learned a lot. I mean, they're just very good people to work with. They've had to literally go through every point with me and feed me how it works. But I can see the benefits of it, and we're desperate to find a system that is transparent. At the moment, my industry, denim industry, the only system we have that all the brands and retailers are using has manual input in it, and it can be fudged, it can be faked. It's not good. So we're all trying to find this solution, and I believe in what they've got. So, and like I say, a bad example is where the industry through marketing has adopted a system called environmental impact measurement system. It works, it reads some of the data from the machines, but ultimately the recipes we use in the laundry are manually input into the data. So if a factory's decided they've gone a bit heavy on the potassium permanganate, they just bring down the litres or whatever, and they hit a green score. And then that goes off to the brand. So we haven't got real transparency. So that's why we're working with that company, because we have to, because the brands are asking us to, but we know there's a problem. So I don't know if that answers properly, but a little bit.
Shall I do a quick good and bad?
A quick one from you, and then also a quick one from OBA.
So
We'll wrap up.
I'll try a really, really quick one. So good one. This is in the built environment, and it's an example of resilience where it's fairly obvious that water assets depend on energy assets to pump the water. The energy assets depend on the telecoms assets. But if they don't have any sight of each other's information, then they can't deliver the best resilient solution. So if you're a water company trying to provide continuous resilient services to your customers, it really benefits to have a little bit of information about the energy system. Because if there's extreme temperatures or flood, that takes out the energy assets, yours are perfectly fine, but if the energy assets go down, then so do yours. And so that's an example of where you need the companies, completely different companies, to have access to each other's information. They have been doing that, and it's been getting better. So that's like a pretty obvious one. A bad example of non-systems thinking is where, for example, you've got a big new infrastructure corridor which you open up from the north to south of England, and all you do is put a train line up it. Because what you could also do is be putting water and electrons and bits that go up it too, and then you can have co-investment for co-benefits. But if you only see it as a transport solution, then it's kind of limiting yourself. I won't name what that's.
So I'll be very quick as well. Like I said, I come from the academic background, so we our partnerships are a bit different from what is in industry. So a good one, I think I'm not gonna be detailed. Anyways, we had the opportunity to meet this group essentially that working on things that relate to the digital testbed like we have. We had similar capabilities, and I feel like throughout this whole conversation I've been talking about aligning goals, and that's very important, because if we want to partner and if we want to create a partnership, we have to have similar goals, we have to have similar behaviors and openness to readiness for technology and openness to change, because this relates to both my cases anyways, because the good one, we were able to align on specific goals. We're able to see that we're trying to address the same capabilities, and we're able to exchange innovative ideas and support each other. Although we have different approaches, but we're able to support each other in the different ends. But for the bad one, we have these goals that sort of correlate with digital catapult as well, with the whole resilient supply chain, sustainable etc. But we met with another group where their whole drive was simply monetary value. They just wanted to make money. They didn't care if they were being sustainable or not. But that goes against what we what we've planned and what we were driving towards. So that was a bad one, and we didn't work with that one at the end. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists for this great discussion. Round of applause for them. And I'll hand it over to our next session.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. That's really, really good, and just shows how discussions around partnerships and collaborations are maturing. We're now moving into the last session, but definitely not the last but least session, I would say. We launched our digital supply chain hub platform in July. And hopefully most of you are already now signed up onto that platform and starting to use it. We're going to give you a little bit more on some of the things we're doing with the platform. And I'm going to hand over to Kingsley, who's going to pick up particularly on our education modules, which he launched recently.
Thank you very much, Tim, and good afternoon, everyone, again. So it's great to be following a session around partnerships, particularly when connections and skills are drawn out quite so much, to be honest, because that's a lot about what the virtual hub or the platform that we've launched will be about. So again, a bit like I did earlier, I'm just going to set this in the context of the overall program. So we kind of talked about the innovation layer and the testbed layer, and then on to the adoption layer. And the adoption layer is very much the aspect that is supported by the Digital Supply Chain Hub platform. And the kind of key aspect here, or the focus here, is around the sort of the journey that we want organizations to go on. So this is very much around the inspire, learn, collaborate, and build, and particularly getting towards that kind of build aspect of it. So organizations, from the inspire perspective, we want them to really understand what the potential is, what they can aim for. The learn aspect is knowing where to start and demystifying digital supply chains. Collaborate, which we focused on quite a lot today, about kind of how we work together in order to get to that build aspect. So the build aspect is very much around the adoption kind of piece. So it's great that we've funded lots of projects. We've done lots of innovation. We've got lots of solutions. Technical partners working with industry partners in kind of projects that demonstrate some of the capability here. But really, where we need to get to is this adoption piece. And when we kind of talk about adoption, we're clearly aspects of that are around what we've done as a program, but actually what we want to do with this platform is go wider than that. So our goal very much is around furthering digital supply chains and the benefits that can be achieved by through digital supply chains. So the platform will be showcasing a lot of the work that we've done. It'll be a way for us to disseminate the kind of the information that has kind of come out of the last 3 years in the program that we run. But we also want it to be a link into everything else that is out there within the digital supply chain world. So that might be technology solutions that aren't part of our program, but will provide value to manufacturing supply chain organizations in the UK. It might be to other educational providers who are running education programs, like supply chain masters programs, that kind of thing. So it's very much a kind of a place where the work that we've done from a digital supply chain hub can stimulate the discussion, can hopefully bring people in, but actually we can then showcase what else is out there and allow organizations to find their way essentially to the other capabilities, the other information, the other resources that they may want or need access to. So just building on the kind of connection element from the previous conversation, if we boil the kind of this digital supply chain hub platform down, essentially on one side of it we have supply chain organizations. Okay, so these are the organizations out there, the manufacturing organizations in the UK who are running their business that probably think that actually hear a lot about digital. Digital could provide value to their organization, but don't necessarily know where to look, how to find that, don't necessarily have that set of skills to really go out and kind of do that discovery piece. So on the other side of the platform, on the other side of the market, then we have an array of technology providers and technology solutions. Again, some of them that we funded through the Digital Supply Chain Hub from an innovation perspective, but also a lot that's just out there on the market. So if we kind of boil it down, what we're trying to do here is bring together those two sides of the market. So we have organizations who believe that technology solutions can provide value to their organization, and we have technology providers who believe that their solutions can provide benefits to manufacturing organizations. So the key aspect really is that the matchmaking capability of the platform. So that's a kind of fundamental aspect that is built into the platform. But then also, in order to kind of support that, then we have, we're going to focus on a range of educational kind of modules, but that's just kind of one of the sets of tools that are part of the platform. So we also have a digital readiness assessment, we also have a resilience tool on there, and there will be further tools that get added to this. So that becomes a kind of a suite of sort of starter capabilities that organizations can use in order to start their journey and start understanding what it is that they need to do. So just a little summary of kind of where we are at the moment. So we launched back in July, and essentially we have sort of two perspectives that we're drawing on here. One is around the business profiles. So business profiles allow organizations to provide information about themselves, about what it is that they do. And again, if we're trying to match these two sides of the market, there's one key focus for us is manufacturing organizations, and then another key focus is around technology solution providers. And you can kind of see that we have both on the platform, some to a greater extent than others, but that'd be one aspect that we're looking to drive. And then on the other side of it, then it's the users. And again, this is where we can, hopefully facilitate some of these connections across, across organizations, across, kind of different sectors. And again, just a little bit of a breakdown of the kind of people that are joining the platform and have joined so far. So we have some, senior leaders on there, so that's great to see. We have some technology and innovators on there already, and we have some people sort of looking from a business development kind of perspective. And again, that's just just pulling out some of those key or different perspectives on that. So just highlighting the fact that there's a diverse set of people and organizations that that are joining the platform. So one of the key things we wanted to focus on today in relation to the platform was the educational modules. And that's partly because we have recently launched the first of 6 educational modules that we are commissioning. Now, if we kind of, again, just sort of step back through the program, when we are talking to organizations, one of the kind of key things that, the bits of feedback that we got was, this digital supply chain sounds great, but I don't know where to start. I don't even know really what you kind of mean by digital supply chains. It's like we run our business, we know that, we have suppliers, but what actually is digital supply chain in the kind of the wider context? And these are people and organizations that don't necessarily want to or have time to go to a traditional education provider or do a long involved course. They kind of want this just bits of nuggets of information, nuggets of kind of how to get started. So the idea was that we were going to put together these 6 modules in order to help kickstart that. And then if people want to find more, they're interested, they kind of see the benefit, then there are other providers who will be able to provide more involved courses. So we recently launched the first module, which is around digital supply chain fundamentals. Again, just trying to get that starting point to what do we mean by digital supply chains? What are some of the concepts around supply chains without the digital element that need to be understood to kind of link into that? And that is now launched and that is now available. So some of the other modules that we're going to be looking at, or we're kind of in the process of building, is this one around digital technologies for your digital supply chain. So again, organizations were saying, or people were saying to us, well, we kind of, don't necessarily understand, sort of digital supply chains and what that really means, but we hear a lot about digital, we hear a lot about blockchain and AI, but what does that actually kind of mean? What is it and how does it, kind of apply to us in our digital supply chain. So second module is a bit of a sort of a 101 about kind of some of these technologies, kind of, what they are, kind of, where the benefits can be provided, and how they might be used. So again, that stepping stone of, getting organizations understanding what some of the potential is here. Then once we understand the fundamentals of digital supply chains, some of the technologies that can be involved there, then how do you put that together into a kind of a more strategic piece? How do you look at that from a sort of a roadmap perspective, a roadmap that's relevant to your organization? So the third module is intended to look at that and help organizations start piecing this together from the perspective of their organization. Then the fourth one is around building a business case. And again, this is another bit of feedback that has come back to us throughout the program. It's kind of, again, talking digital is great. You can see some of the benefits, but how do we put together a business case that allows me to prove to my business that this is valuable and get their kind of buy-in? And I think this is particularly the case possibly with manufacturing organizations that are very much used to business cases around large capital investment, which for digital solutions might be slightly different approach that is required. So this is trying to draw out some of the nuances there around how you build your business case for a digital. And the fifth module that we're looking at is around digital transformation. And again, we kind of touched on it a bit in the last discussion around, it's not just about technology, it's about the whole process of change, the whole process of transformation. So once you understand the technology a bit more, once you put together your kind of roadmap that makes sense for your organization, you've managed to build your business case, how would you actually put it into practice? What are the considerations that you would need to think around from the skills in your organization, the change implications that would go along with that? And then finally, the sixth module that we're developing is more around the sort of sustainability and kind of ethical and compliance kind of aspects. So again, these are really fundamental aspects the organizations are going to have to address. We feel the digital is a good approach to helping with that. So once you have all of those other foundational kind of elements in place, how can you kind of apply this to some of those aspects which are potentially a little bit more complex, and certainly, as we've kind of discussed today, rely a lot on collaboration and sharing information between organizations. So those are the 6 modules that we're looking to build. Again, these are a starting point. They're an initial stepping stone for organizations to start understanding, what the potential is. Again, looking at that journey of kind of inspire, learn, collaborate, build. And we're not trying to be an educational provider here. We're literally trying to fill a gap that we believe that there is in the market for getting organizations on the kind of the first step on their journey. So with that said, the last thing for me to do is a bit of a call to action for everyone, is to ask you to, if you haven't already, is to join the community, is to sign up to the hub. There's a QR code there. There's been QR codes on the presentations that we've gone through that should link you into the hub. So please, if you haven't, sign up. Well, that is everything for me. So I will hand back to Tim for a wrap up. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yes, thanks. Please, make the most of the hub platform. I think it's some really great content on there, some great knowledge and insight. And over here we have our community manager, Joya, who's organising and managing everything to do with the hub and getting the community moving. So if you get a chance, please join, and Joya will help you join circles, learn what to do, pick up. Continue the collaborations that have already been formed in the room and in the discussions we've had by doing it online as well, because that's really can multiply the opportunity and the benefit of that. I think it's been a really great afternoon, and I think just on reflection, I think we started the beginning of the afternoon really talking about the big challenges and the themes with Phil's discussion around the need to fundamentally transform what we're doing and how digital can support that to address Brexit and all these other big things that we've heard about here and the impact that has had on us. What's interesting for me is that we've talked about lots of different sectors today, yet the themes are the same, right? The challenges are the same. It's whether it be textiles, food, aerospace and defence, automotive, yeah, around the supply chain area, all of these themes are quite common, yeah, and challenging to address. I think then we talked and got into this whole thing about innovation, deployment, and adoption, yeah, the three layers. And you saw some great examples of the sorts of innovations that are being developed, particularly through the test beds and through the organisations and the tech innovations that the test beds are testing, made by Looper, Lodar, Hurus Energy and others. And we've got 35 of those. There's loads of them out there, right? And there's more that we want to link you to as well. So, if you are interested in adopting, you can really find those innovations out there. But I think I'm now changing my view of the picture we have, right? And I suppose one of the key messages that came around after the break was really about that collaboration, yeah? And how do we enable and create this bigger ability to share data effectively across supply chain networks and manage data, and how does that almost sits for me around the whole diagram of what we have. If we want to innovate more effectively, if we want to deploy into test beds, and if we want to deliver, we have to find a way of more effectively collaborating as a network, but also across supply chains with the right data infrastructure and ways of doing that and the ways of working it. And I think there was some good things that we talked about in terms of not only the digital side of that, because actually I don't think the big challenge is actually the digital technologies, right? A lot of it's going to be around the trust, the governance, the culture, all of those things that we started to pick up on in relation to how we make that work and how we make that happen. So I think, I think it was a really good way of actually saying that, and I think we finished off with talking really a lot about how we can then support that adoption journey and drive that adoption journey for organisations through what we're doing in the hub and how that works, yeah, and underpinned by that. So I think, it's from the point of view of the whole day, I think it's just pulled nicely together those things, and I think for us there's some thinking to do about how do we really shape up some of these bigger topics, yeah, to take forward and, into the next phase of the sort of digital supply chain hub program and other things we want to do as we move forward on this. So thanks very much for everyone's participation. I think it's been a great afternoon. We've now got an opportunity to socialise and network for the last hour or so. So I think with some networking drinks outside. Thanks to all the speakers for their preparation, not just today, but for running some brilliant projects, and for the sponsors and for the funders of those projects as well, because they wouldn't happen without all of that capability that we've seen coming together in the right collaborative way to deliver the program. So thanks to everybody, and really looking forward to accelerating from here over the next 6 months of the program and onwards. So thank you, everybody. And by the way, just last but not least, there's some events we're running and some further QR codes and stuff. So, and our showcase is coming up in March, and the Made Smarter showcase in February. Yeah. So just some other dates for the diary, so don't forget those.